Chapter 780. As soon as Wu Qi and Feng Ho were sent out of the great hall, they heard a melodious immortal tune ringing out of it. Surrounded by thousands of ancient immortals and tens of thousands of deities, 6 flood dragons pulled a dazzling chariot and rose into the sky, spewing clouds of light and auspicious mist. The Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, had changed into an emperor's outfit and was emanating a great pressure that no one dared to look directly at him. Sitting in the chariot with a sullen face, his vast aura made the entire Xianyuan peak tremble. A ring of golden light radiated out from the back of his head like a sun, radiating tens of thousands of miles in circumference. A dense purple mist spewed out of it, blotting out half of the sky. It was a glorious scene that could not be described with words unless one saw it with one's own eyes. The fleet flew hundreds of miles up into the sky, surrounded by purple clouds. The bronze chariots came whistling over, surrounded by the front, back, left, and right of the fleet, flying up into the sky together. Each of the 4 armies had 100,000 chariots, and each chariot was manned by 2 chariots, 1 divine general, 12 deities, and 36 soldiers. The total number of the 4 armies was more than 10 million. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. The man in the linen robe and straw sandals just now was not the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. This was the aura that the sacred emperor of the human race should have. Once he set out, he would be guarded by tens of millions of deities, and the light of virtue would illuminate the void. Compared to this majestic aura, the sovereign of the myriad immortal alliance and the Buddhas of the Buddhist League whom Wu Qi had seen in the past, who were also shrouded in auspicious light and auspicious mist, could not even compare to the little finger of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. With his excellent eyesight, Wu Qi saw that wherever the chariot passed, all the natural barriers in the sky that could give even gold immortals headaches disappeared. Whether it was the wind, the lightning, the Xian Bing, or the aurora, they all calmed down in front of the chariot. Wherever the golden aura passed, the natural barriers that sealed off the sky above Pangu continent dispersed like snow being poured into boiling water, and the natural energy became peaceful. As he stared at the Yellow Emperor's chariot in a daze, someone suddenly pulled Wu Qi's trousers a few times. Feng Ho looked up and stared at Wu Qi. "Boy, come back to your senses," he cried. "This is the Emperor's traveling light. If you saw the chariot of millions of deities following behind him when he was conquering the world, wouldn't you be scared out of your wits?" Feng Ho jumped up and kicked Wu Qi in the shin, then stroked his long white beard and said with a smile, "Hurry up, I'll teach you the fiend-slaying sword formation, so you can go and have a drink with those old immortals." "TSK, the Emperor has gone to see Empress Hua. I don't know when he will come back, so I can take the chance to slack off." "Hee. Is your brain working well? If not, I don't know when you will be able to learn it." Wu Qi's brain worked very well. His innate chaotic divine soul was comparable in nature to the immortal soul of a primordial expert, although it was not as strong. However, he had devoured so many evil spirits and soul fragments that his divine sense was much stronger than those peak-level gold immortals. Therefore, Wu Qi's brain worked very well. Basically, anything he saw would be immediately comprehended by him. However, the fiend-slaying sword formation was a secret formation that the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan used to kill the rebellious Qiyu clan in ancient times. It was filled with endless mysteries, and was even more complicated than the so-called cosmic star formation. The cosmic star formation only used tens of thousands of stars in the universe, but the fiend-slaying sword formation not only used the stars, but also took into account the changes of the natural energies of earth, water, fire, wind, and countless other factors, such as the terrain and underground veins. It was an indefinite sword formation. The more factors one used to form the formation, the stronger it would be. If one could fuse all the great Taos of the universe into the sword formation, it would have the power to break the chaos and destroy a world. In other words, if one fused the great Tao of the universe into the sword formation, the sword energy would be able to shatter the stars. If one fused the great Tao of the universe into the sword formation, they would be able to manifest the power of the 4 elements and form the true forms of the sacred beasts of the 4 directions to attack others. If one could fuse space and time into the sword formation, they would be able to control time and shatter the void at will. If one could fuse the terrain of the earth veins into the formation, they would be able to play with the world at will. Apart from these natural heavenly Daos, one could also fuse countless living beings such as humans, deities, immortals, ghosts, and many others into the formation to form it. The foundation of such a huge and complicated sword formation was the 108 Kunwu swords. The complexity of the fiend-slaying sword formation was beyond Wu Qi's expectation, as it could manifest almost all the great Daos of the entire universe with the Kunwu swords. Even with his vast divine sense and Feng Ho's teachings, it took him 7 days and 7 nights just to memorize the most basic and original formation diagram of the sword formation. He could not make any calculations or make any changes. A vast amount of mysterious information filled Wu Qi's divine soul. Wu Qi felt like a fat man who had eaten too much. His vision darkened, and sweat kept breaking out all over his body. His divine soul was so congested that he even forgot his own name. It was a terrible formation that could not be set up and operated without attaining the realm of primordial. It was an all-encompassing formation that basically incorporated all the mysteries of formations in the universe. Compared to the mysteries of formations that Wu Qi had learned from the Scroll of Stealing, the fiend-slaying sword formation was a tree growing from the tree root, a tree that included almost all the changes of formations. As long as Wu Qi could fully understand the fiend-slaying sword formation, he dared not say what would happen in the future, but at least all the formations in the universe would not be able to stop him. Streams of green light wheeled and danced in the square in front of the gate of Xianyuan Palace. Following Wu Qi's will, the 108 Kunwu swords were drawing the energies of 5 elements to form the formation, following the most basic changes of the sword formation. Kunwu swords could not be controlled with the magic power of immortals. If an immortal dared to touch them with his immortal power, they would immediately be attacked with all their might. Only those who had practiced the mystic arts of the human race could control the swords with their divine will or Panga's sacred energy. Now, Wu Qi was shrouded in purple mist, extending out of his body like an octopus. Holding the Kunwu swords in his hand, he drew the energies of 5 elements to form one screen of light after another around him. Gradually, the true forms of 5 elements began to emerge around Wu Qi. Countless blades and swords, large patches of dense green trees, lofty mountains, torrential lava, and rolling oceans, all of them rushed out of the air amidst the rumbling of wind and thunder, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other around Wu Qi. Each of the Kunwu swords was as light as a goose feather, and their green blades were completely transparent as if they were cast from crystal. Each of their lines followed the great Tao of heaven and earth, their length corresponded to the 360 degrees of the universe, and their width corresponded to the 24 solar terms. Under Wu Qi's control, the Kunwu swords glowed faintly as they streaked through the air, each of which looked like a trace of the great Tao, giving off a mysterious and beautiful allure that made one's divine soul want to be immersed in it. But only Wu Qi, who was controlling the Kunwu swords, knew how heavy they became after the Panga's sacred energy was injected into them. The more Panga's sacred energy was injected into them, the heavier they became. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, each of the Kunwu swords he controlled weighed hundreds of millions of tons, several times heavier than an ordinary star in an outer heavenly realm. Such a marvelous sword did not need its sharpness at all. Its weight alone could crush an enemy to pieces. Wu Qi could not help but feel sad for Qiyu, who was killed by the Kunwu swords. With the cultivation base of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, how heavy must the Kunwu swords he controlled be? Qiyu must have been in great pain when he was struck by a sword like that, right? Like fish swimming in a clear stream, the Kunwu swords wheeled back and forth around Wu Qi with the energies of the 5 elements, gradually activating the power of heaven and earth. Wave after wave of incomparably sharp sword intent spread out in all directions, sharp and suffocating, forcing Feng Ho and the few ancient immortals who were watching Wu Qi practicing the sword formation in the square to step back. After teaching Wu Qi the profound knowledge of the fiend-slaying sword formation for a few days, Feng Ho squatted on the head of a blue tiger and watched with a smile as Wu Qi gradually practiced the sword formation from rusty to proficient. He nodded lightly, then whispered to the few ancient immortals around him, "My emperor really has a good eye for talent. None of those lads on Xianyuan Peak could inherit my emperor's Tao of military formation, but this lad is not bad. He can really master the sword formation." The few ancient immortals nodded and smiled as well. They looked at Wu Qi, then at a group of deity generals who were flaunting their prowess at the edge of the square, comparing their muscles with each other, and could not help but sigh at the same time. Apart from these violent men, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan also had many talented men. For example, Crown Prince Chang Qin was a handsome and talented man of his time. But these people were not interested in the Tao of military formation, because the fiend-slaying sword formation was actually taught to Wu Qi, an outsider. After immersing himself in the sword formation for half a month, Wu Qi finally took a deep breath and drew back the purple energy around him. Kunwu swords, which had been hovering around Wu Qi like fish, entered Wu Qi's body along with the purple energy, hiding in his acupoints and allowing him to nourish them with his own blood essence. While Wu Qi was nourishing them with his blood essence, they were also absorbing the natural energy between heaven and earth, feeding back extremely pure energy to strengthen Wu Qi's fleshly body and divine soul. Kunwu swords were not just weapons of killing. After taking them into his body, Wu Qi immediately sensed the great benefits they brought him. Even the Panga's sacred energy in him had become much purer after being purified by them. Feng Ho, who had been watching Wu Qi perform the sword formation, jumped down from the green tiger's head. He took small steps and came before Wu Qi, then asked with a smile, "I've taught you the sword formation. But, how well you use it in practice will depend on your own ability. Well, there's nothing for you to do here, so hurry up and do what you need to do." A few ancient immortals had already brought out tables and wooden stools with smiles on their faces, and placed wine jars and side dishes on them. Obviously, they were going to have a good drink with Feng Ho. While talking to Wu Qi, Feng Ho kept turning his head to look at the few ancient immortals. Obviously, his mind was not on Wu Qi at all. Shaking his numb head, Wu Qi blinked his dry eyelids, then bowed respectfully to Feng Ho and said, "Thank you for your advice, old mister." Feng Ho waved his hand impatiently and said, "Go away, don't talk so much. Just remember what His Majesty wants you to do, and don't mess it up." Feng Ho swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared at the wine jars taken out by the few ancient immortals. Wu Qi smiled and bowed to Feng Ho again, then walked out of Xianyuan Peak accompanied by a few Qiyu clansmen. His divine soul was still filled with the endless mysteries of the fiend-slaying sword formation, but Wu Qi's heart was filled with joy. During this trip to Xianyuan Peak, Wu Qi had gained too many things. The Yellow Emperor had given him the Kunwu swords and taught him the fiend-slaying sword formation. What did this mean? Wu Qi was a little complacent. Not many people in Deyu's imperial court could enjoy such treatment, could they? With a belly full of joy, Wu Qi left Xianyuan Peak and hurried to the East Sea province with his divine ability. Chapter 781. While Wu Qi was studying the sword formation on Xianyuan Peak, Princess Zhang was facing a crisis. Both Liu Bang and King Zhang Qiu had taken a fancy to Princess Zhang, but neither of them was a man who would give in easily, and they were both ruthless and resolute men. Therefore, Liu Bang immediately unleashed the sky-veiling flag of chaos and swung it down at Princess Zhang. As the flag flashed, the void above Princess Zhang and the others suddenly turned pitch black. All the natural energy was absorbed by the flag, and in an instant, the space around them turned into a vacuum, with even the air being sucked away. An invisible restrictive force had locked everyone's body tightly like iron chains. In the next moment, a shadowy shadow was seen thrusting towards Princess Zhang Li's head like a long whip. It was the sky-veiling flag of primordial chaos that was absorbing the spirit chi of heaven and earth and imprisoning everyone's bodies. It was the flagpole of the sky-veiling flag of primordial chaos that was turning into a steel whip and lashing down. The flag was the spirit treasure of the Emperor of the Celestial Court, a spirit artifact of chaos. Even though Liu Bang could not control it at will, it still possessed a terrible power that could frighten even ghosts and deities away. A loud noise rang out as a dark curtain of light was torn open in the void, through which countless streaks of colorful light could be seen streaking across like shooting stars. Princess Zhang snorted. She looked up at the sky and pointed a finger at it. Suddenly, a great sheet of white gold energy burst out of the five-colored divine light, condensing into a living silver lotus flower over her head, wrapping it in a five-colored light as it flew toward the flagpole. The innate gold and silver lotus had been refined by Princess Zhang Le day and night, and now it was completely under her control, allowing her to unleash 100% of its power. Although the sky-veiling flag of chaos was a spirit artifact of chaos, it was not in the hands of its master. Therefore, Lu Bang could only unleash less than 1/10,000th of its power. The two extraordinary treasures collided with each other. The cloud under Princess Zhang Li's feet suddenly dispersed, and her body was sent flying down for hundreds of feet before she finally stabilized her body. A vast and inexhaustible force followed the connection between her divine soul and the silver lotus and struck towards her divine soul, but in the blink of an eye, it was sliced into pieces by countless sharp auras. Wave after wave of spiritual power continuously attacked Princess Zhang Li's sea of consciousness, but the spiritual power that was cut apart was fragmented. Princess Zhang Li's sea of consciousness was vast and tough, and firmly withstood this wave of attack. Meanwhile, the sky-veiling flag of chaos was sent flying tens of miles into the air, its pole trembling and letting out a deep cry. Following the faint connection between Lu Bang and the sky-veiling flag of chaos, a great sheet of grey divine power wrapped in dozens of gleaming white blades and slashed toward Lu Bang. Shrill cracking noises kept ringing out as the invisible restrictive spells used by Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu to cover their tracks were torn to shreds by the extremely sharp gold element energies. Countless beams of cold light flashed in front of their eyes, frightening them into flying into the sky with all their attendants. Miserable howls rang through the sky as King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang's attendants were torn to pieces by the blades condensed of gold element energies. Wherever the bright blades passed, all the immortal items and magical treasures were sliced flat. Even the upper-grade heaven immortal items wielded by a few female immortals around Lu Bang were sliced in half like tofu, and these beautiful female immortals were also cut in half at the waist. The grey divine power transformed into tiny tornadoes and rose into the sky, quickly enveloping Lu Bang, King Zhangqiu, and the others. Suddenly, a great plume of black flame sprayed out of King Zhangqiu's body. He grunted under his breath as two streams of blood gushed out of his nostrils. He locked his hands into an incantation gesture and recited an incantation under his breath, silently expelling the divine power of the god of scourge that had invaded his body. From time to time, bumps the size of fists popped out of his skin and flowed like living creatures. King Zhangqiu trembled violently. Not daring to be careless, he used the power of the ghost god he worshipped to fight against the divine power of the god of scourge. But the military officers who came with him did not have the same cultivation base as King Zhangqiu. Several of them, whose cultivation bases had reached the realm of the second Panga heaven, had blood of a strange color spray out of their 7 orifices at the same time. Then, all kinds of strange ailments emerged in their internal organs. Strange ailments such as knots in their intestines, shortness of breath in their lungs, and sagging livers swarmed over them, causing them to break out in cold sweat and fall to the ground, unable to move. Lu Bang was so frightened that he gave a strange cry and cried out, "This is not good. We need to get out of here now. Why does that girl have an innate treasure as well?" Before Lu Bang, who had transformed into a stream of light and was flying up into the sky, could finish his words, a huge meteor suddenly emerged hundreds of feet over his head. The meteor, composed entirely of high-density metal, came smashing down at great speed and smashed heavily on Lu Bang's head. Lu Bang howled miserably as the top of his skull was smashed to a pulp. Blood and brain matter sprayed out in all directions, and half of his body was almost shattered by the meteor. It was unknown what kind of cultivation technique Lu Bang had practiced, but when the meteor smashed half of his body to pieces, there were wisps of starlight drifting down from the void, quickly mixing with the blood and minced flesh that sprayed out of Lu Bang's mouth, outlining the shattered half of his body. A powerful stream of star power rushed into Lu Bang's body, mixed with an extremely strong aura of life. Lu Bang's body recovered quickly, and he gave a strange cry as he hurriedly leaped to the side. The meteor that had almost killed Lu Bang fell heavily to the ground and smashed into the bodies of King Zhangqiu and the few military officers who came with him, whose bodies had been invaded by the god of Scourge's power. The earth shook violently, and the land 1,000 miles in circumference collapsed abruptly. The meteor plunged more than 1,000 miles deep into the ground, and lava and poisonous flames gushed out of the ground at the same time. King Zhangqiu and the other military officers had strong fleshly bodies, but they were still alive after being smashed into the ground by the meteor and burned by the lava and poisonous flames for a long time. Howling, they struggled to their feet and returned to King Zhangqiu's side. In the distance, Princess Zhongli's eyes shone with a strong seven-colored light. Like two searchlights, they tore through thousands of miles of space in a flash and shone on Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu. Princess Zhongli gave a cold snort. With a gentle flip of her hand, the tens of thousands of mountains in her interstitial world began to sway together, each sending half of their energy to Princess Zhongli. The shadow of a mountain quickly took shape in her small, fair palm. Then, Princess Zhongli beckoned at the silver lotus over her head. A great stream of silver light flew out of the petals of the lotus and fused into the shadow of the mountain. A cold laugh rang out as Princess Zhongli waved her hand. The fist-sized mountain spun into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The next moment, the mountain reappeared over King Zhangqiu's head and smashed down toward his head with a strong gust of wind. Princess Zhongli had created her own interstitial world and possessed the ability to manipulate the power of the world. This was the main reason why she was able to unleash such a mighty power even though she had just stepped into the realm of gold immortals. As for other gold immortals, even if they were peak-level gold immortals, if they had not created their own interstitial world, their overall strength would never be as strong as Princess Zhongli, even if their immortal energy was thousands of times stronger than Princess Zhongli's. The tens of thousands of mountains in her interstitial world were looted by Princess Zhongli and Wuqi from Myriad Immortals Planet and other planets. These mountains had sent half of their energy to Princess Zhongli, so the mountain she had condensed was equivalent to tens of thousands of huge mountains smashing down at the same time. In particular, she had injected a large amount of golden hepta qi into the hill. This hill was not only heavy to the extreme, but also sharp to the extreme. When King Zhangqiu heard a gust of wind coming from the top of his head, he hurriedly looked up and saw a fist-sized, translucent mountain smashing down on his head. A deafening boom rang out as a column of flame towered into the sky from the top of King Zhangqiu's head, sending a great amount of blood flying hundreds of miles away. King Zhangqiu's tall body was smashed deep into the ground, enveloped by the poisonous magma and burned violently. A palm-sized piece of skull on his forehead was smashed into pieces. The terrifying force rushed into his skull and almost crushed his brain. King Zhangqiu let out a miserable howl. Princess Zhongli's attack was so terrible that even though his fleshly body had reached the 8 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, his head was nearly smashed by Princess Zhongli's attack. He was different from Lu Bang. Lu Bang could save his life with an immortal magic, but if King Zhangqiu's head was smashed, he would die on the spot, and a wisp of his soul would have to enter transmigration and be reincarnated. Drenched in sweat, King Zhangqiu howled as he shot up into the sky from the magma. Behind him, a round bone talisman, tens of feet in circumference, shone with a dazzling light and quickly formed a small door of light. Together with a few captains who came with him, King Zhangqiu smashed into the door and disappeared without a trace. The door of light quickly disintegrated into streams of light and dissipated. Seeing that King Zhangqiu had fled with the help of the talisman, Lu Bang cursed in exasperation. Ignoring the fate of the beautiful fairies around him, he fled into the distance like a stray dog. The hill that had severely wounded King Zhangqiu spun up into the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it had arrived at Lu Bang's back. As the hill pressed down, a plume of black smoke rose from Lu Bang's body. The sky-veiling flag of chaos transformed into a thick black mist and wrapped around Lu Bang. No matter how the hill smashed Lu Bang a dozen times, it still could not hurt Lu Bang. Princess Zhongli's breath had run out. She scolded in a low voice, then opened her mouth and sucked the hill back from thousands of miles away. Then, she grabbed the hill and pulled it back into her interstitial world. The power of the earth energy veins quickly returned to the mountains, and for a moment, a rumbling noise rang out from Princess Zhongli's body, sounding extremely frightening. Yu Mu, who was fighting with Yu Mu and others, frowned. He glanced into the distance and cursed in a low voice, "Don't meddle in these muddy waters." The soul of Yinglong fell whistling down from above. Yu Mu had planned to capture Princess Zhanglu alive with the soul of Yinglong, but when he saw that Princess Zhanglu actually possessed such a divine ability and magic power, which allowed her to force King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang to flee in panic with just the overall strength of a gold immortal, everyone present had witnessed it with their own eyes. Hesitantly, Yu Mu beckoned at the soul of Yinglong and summoned it back into the space above his head. He was not sure if he could withstand the blow from the hill, especially since he had the body of an immortal, which was definitely not as strong as King Zhangqiu's. All his abilities were based on the gourd, and he did not have any other immortal items with him. With a cold snort, Yu Mu steered the gourd and was about to flee. But, how could Princess Zhanglu allow him to do that? Countless fine beams of silver light shot out of the silver lotus over her head, turning into a rain of swords that rained down on Yu Mu's head. "Yu Mu, you old thief, die!" Princess Zhanglu said with a cold snort. While Princess Zhanglu was chasing after Yu Mu relentlessly, a cold snort suddenly came from the void, and in the next moment, a huge black hand came pressing down from above. When everyone looked up quickly, they saw a deity standing 100 miles tall in the sky, standing on 2 black flood dragons and thrusting his palm down angrily. Chapter 782. With a cold snort, the god, who stood 100 miles tall and whose skin was as dark as coal, and who stood on 2 black flood dragons, had his huge palm pressing down on everyone. He did not care who was right or wrong, and his attack included everyone down below. The huge palm compressed the air, and a thick layer of white wind emerged in the palm. Amidst a deep, muffled whistle, the air around them became as hard as steel, making it difficult for them to breathe. Yu Miao looked up at the god, then roared furiously, "Which great emperor's ancient god are you? How dare you invade the territory of Diyu?" Amidst the roar, a plume of white smoke rose thousands of feet high from the top of Yu Miao's head, on top of which hovered a ferocious ghost head. The ghost head's eyes were wide open, gleaming with a cold gleam as it fixed its gaze on the god's huge palm. The speed of the palm, which was falling like Mount Tai, became extremely slow, pressing down almost inch by inch. The god snorted in surprise, while Yu Miao's body trembled. The tremendous pressure made his blood and energy surge, and his face turned purplish red. The god did not answer Yu Miao's question. He just laughed evilly, and the 2 flood dragons under his feet gave a strange cry. Suddenly, the ground around them collapsed, forming a bottomless pit tens of thousands of miles in circumference. Even the dozens of nearby cities disappeared without a trace. Thick water vapor turned into a black mist and sprayed out of the pit. Dark clouds wheeled around the crowd, and in the blink of an eye, the whole world was enveloped. The temperature in the surroundings plummeted, and the water vapor in the dark clouds gradually condensed into frost. Large sheets of snowflakes fell from the sky, and when they touched the bodies of the people, they immediately turned into white cold air and squeezed into their bodies, freezing their skin and muscles. The soldiers sent by Gao and the private soldiers of Yu clan were shivering in the cold, and some soldiers with weaker cultivation bases shivered and even fainted. The sound of teeth chattering could be heard everywhere. Some of the fainted soldiers were covered with a thin layer of ice, and as their body temperature dropped rapidly, they soon lost all signs of life. Their life force was gradually draining from their bodies, and they were about to be frozen to death. The soul of Ing Dragon was wheeling around Yu Miao, Yu Mu, and the others. Ing Dragons were the gods of water, so the surrounding water vapor and ice did not affect them much. On top of that, Yu Miao's gourd kept spewing out high-temperature flames, driving away the occasional wisps of cold air that occasionally seeped into the cave. Yu Mu looked up at the giant god and cried out, "My lord, I have no enmity with you. Whether you are seeking revenge or doing something else, could you please allow me to leave with these juniors?" Slowly pressing his palm down inch by inch, the god snorted coldly and said, "How do I know if you have no enmity with me? Today, everyone here obediently surrender, and I'll let you live for a few more days. Whoever dares to act recklessly, don't blame me for being ruthless." The huge palm pressing down on the crowd was wrapped in a layer of strong water, and the force pressing down suddenly increased by a few times. Yu Miao's body trembled, and the white mist above his head shrank by more than half. The ferocious ghost head became weak, and the cold gleam shooting out of its eyes gradually faded away. It seemed that Yu Miao had lost the strength to hold on any longer. The three elders of the Yu clan, who were close to the realm of supreme oracles, struck at the same time. Black, white, and green lights burst out of their bodies, turning into three beams of light that shot straight into the sky. Vaguely, the figures of all kinds of ghosts and deities could be seen looming in the beams of light. "Is my lord unreasonable?" cried the three elders in unison. The god frowned and thought for a while. Then, he stopped and said slowly, "Reason with me. What is reasonable? You have imprisoned so many divine beasts of my emperor and killed their children for no reason. What reason do I have?" With a cold snort, the god pressed his right hand down again. Yu Miao and the three elders joined hands, but they could hardly stop his palm from pressing down. A few beams of light were crushed and creaked noisily, while Yu Miao and the others trembled violently and broke out in cold sweat. This god was not a newborn god like the ones Wu Qi had killed in those years, but a real ancient god who had survived from the ancient times. Those newborn gods had not even fully formed their bodies, let alone master the laws of heaven and earth that they were born with, forming their golden bodies and mastering their real power. When they were born, they were nothing but wisps of energy, and did not even have a human form. Their overall strength was so weak that even the wind could melt them. When they formed their bodies, they would be able to walk around like a living person, and possess the strength equal to that of an ordinary cultivator or even a heaven immortal. When they formed their golden bodies, it would prove that they had mastered the laws of heaven and earth that they owned, and would possess the overall strength equal to that of a gold immortal. After attaining the overall strength of a gold immortal, the overall strength of a god would basically reach its limit. If they wanted to improve their overall strength, they could only rely on a long period of time to gradually comprehend the laws of heaven and earth that they were born with, and derive stronger laws from them. For example, among the gods who were born with the laws of fire, some gods might only possess an ordinary law of fire, but the so-called superhuman aptitude and excellent bloodline possessed the laws of innate fire, such as the divine flame of order and the divine flame of void. The gods who mastered ordinary flames could at most cause a forest fire to hurt mortals. But the gods who mastered the power of innate divine flames could threaten existences like primordial immortals with just a casual strike. As time went by, their mastery of the laws became more and more thorough, and their power naturally grew stronger and stronger. In addition to tapping into the power of the laws, gods could also constantly strengthen their bodies to accommodate more divine power, and thus become stronger and stronger. In the ancient times, the most powerful gods who had fallen in the war against human beings were tens of thousands of miles tall, and the divine power in their bodies was almost inexhaustible. Even if they compressed their divine bodies could still be hundreds of miles long. Therefore, experienced people could tell the power of a god from the size of his body at a glance. The god hovering above them now was 100 miles tall, with strange black ripples flowing on the surface of his skin, and the void around him was swaying. Clearly, he had compressed his body with a mystic art, which was why he could maintain a body that was 100 miles long. In other words, his true divine body was far longer than 100 miles, and a god of this height could never be one of those newborn gods. He could only be a formidable existence left behind in the ancient times. Such a god might not be as powerful as a primordial immortal in terms of divine power, but in terms of the power represented by the laws of heaven and earth, even ordinary primordial immortals could not compare with them. Immortals borrowed the power of heaven and earth, but gods themselves were part of the laws of heaven and earth, their true forms condensed by the laws of heaven and earth. Their mastery of power was beyond the imagination of ordinary immortals. The enormous pressure emanated by the palm made Yu Mu and the others sweat profusely. But, the temperature kept dropping as the dark mist lingered in the air. Their sweat quickly turned into ice, and soon, the four of them were wrapped in ice. Large sheets of snowflakes kept falling from the sky, and every snowflake that fell on them turned into wisps of cold air, drilling into their bodies and gradually freezing them. Yu Miao began to recite an incantation. He wanted to summon the ghosts and deities they worshipped to fight against the ancient god. He had heard about the ancient god imprisoning the divine beasts and killing their children. Wasn't that what Wu Qi had done? Now that Wu Qi was missing, the backers of those divine beasts had come to him. No matter why they had the confidence to invade De Yu's territory to vent their anger, this ancient god had undoubtedly found the right place. Princess Xianglu was Wu Qi's woman, and Yu Miao was close to Wu Qi as well. This ancient god had found the right person to cause them trouble. The question was, how did he know that it was Wu Qi who had done that, and how did he find Princess Xianglu and Yu Miao so accurately? Yu Miao's incantation turned into a deep rumble of thunder and spread out in all directions, but it was frozen by the cold air and soon dissipated in the air. A soft, cold energy sealed off the surrounding void, and the power of Yu Miao's incantation could not penetrate it. Since he could not summon the ghosts and deities he worshipped, he naturally could not get his power to fight against the enemy. A soft cry rang out as the silver lotus flower hovering above Princess Xianglu unleashed countless silver lights, which transformed into flying swords and slashed toward the ancient god. However, the ancient god's body rippled with endless layers of water light. The flying sword pierced through layer after layer of water ripples. Each layer of water ripples dimmed the light of the flying sword. As a result, when it was still several feet away from the ancient god's body, the flying sword completely dissipated. The golden hepta chi was swallowed up by the black water ripples, but it increased the power of the water ripples. The ancient god gave a hideous grin and murmured in a low voice, "This place has been completely sealed off by some black water fiend formation. No one will answer your call to heaven and earth. Hee, just wait for your death. Girl, I can't believe you have awakened your ancient bloodline. Hee, come back with me, and the child you and I will give birth to will surely be a mighty god." Princess Zhongli's face flickered. The silver lotus flower was the most powerful magical artifact she had, but even it could not defeat the ancient god. Gold element gave birth to water, and the energy of gold element did not pose too much of a threat to this ancient god, who was obviously born from the law of water. Instead, the energy of gold element would be used to evolve into innate water and increase his power. The tens of thousands of miles wide crater revealed by the collapse of the earth had turned into a vast black ocean. Dense water vapor rose from the surface of the water and condensed into thousands of huge flags hovering in the air. As the flags fluttered slowly, countless bone-piercing snowflakes sprinkled down from the sky and stuck to the bodies of the people. A cracking noise rang out as the armors of the few captains sent by Gao standing next to Princess Xianglu were shattered. Shivering, they fell to the ground and were gradually covered by layers of ice. Princess Xianglu arched her brows. The silver lotus flower emitted a large sheet of five-colored light and enveloped them. But, in the face of the endless snowflakes, the light was eroded layer by the cold air and grew dimmer. Princess Xianglu felt helpless. Seeing that Yu Miao and the others were suffocating under the pressure, she could only reach out a hand and make a grabbing gesture, enveloping Yu Miao and the others in the five-colored light. The elders of Yu clan, their private army, and the army sent by Gao were all protected by Princess Xianglu with her divine ability, which saved them from being frozen to death on the spot. The ancient gods saw that Princess Xianglu had protected the people, and that he was in De Yu's blessed land, but he did not panic at all. Instead, he slowly operated the formation and summoned countless snowflakes to envelop the people. The land tens of thousands of miles in circumference was enveloped by a dense layer of water vapor, so no one could see what was happening inside. Occasionally, the ancient god would let out a deep laugh, which was filled with endless complacency and expectation. Chapter 783. Oh, ha ha ha. The muscles in Wu Qi's legs twitched as a powerful fluctuation of the earth veins rushed up to his head with a loud rumble. The scorching Pangu's sacred energy washed his body, making him sweat profusely. A large amount of Pangu's sacred energy had fused with his fleshly body, expelling the waste produced by his metabolism. A rumble echoed out from the earth veins as Wu Qi's body flashed and tore through the void, flying 10 billion miles away in the blink of an eye. His body was boiling hot, and his blood vessels and meridians were stretched to their fullest. Surging energy was circulating in his body. Nearly half of the remains of the ancient immortals in his interstitial world had been refined, and 30% of the enormous willpower from Buddha Futu had been digested by his divine soul. Stimulated by the Panga's sacred energy, both his fleshly body and magic power were growing rapidly. Wu Qi felt as if he had grown a pair of wings on his back, making him feel as if he was about to fly. Like 108 perpetual motion machines, the Kunwu swords rapidly extracted the Panga's sacred energy gushing out of the earth veins, purified them, and injected them into Wu Qi's body. The speed at which a single Kunwu sword extracted the Panga's sacred energy was several times faster than Wu Qi's own cultivation. With 108 Kunwu swords working at the same time, Wu Qi's cultivation base skyrocketed. Wisps of green light shot out of 108 vital meridians on his body, and the dragon-like Panga's sacred energy was sucked into his body. Wherever Wu Qi passed, there was no more purple energy within 10,000 miles of him. It was a terrifying sight. It had taken Wu Qi more than a month to reach the land of Sacred Emperor, but it only took him 7 days to return to Zhong province. With a long roar, Wu Qi rushed past Zhongning city. His divine sense swept across the city, and he was immediately alerted by the unusual changes in Yu Clan's mansion. A few oracles from the Yu Clan in Liangzhu were talking about the recent changes, and it was only then that Wu Qi learned that the visit of Princess Zhanglu had caused Yu Miao and Yu Mu to fall out with each other and split the Yu Clan in Zhong province. Now, Princess Zhanglu was working with Yu Mu and the others to hunt Yu Miao and his companions all over the world. Zi Xian is quite capable. In this way, if I go out, I won't have to worry about my foundation being unstable. Wu Qi laughed out loud. He stopped and took out a jade talisman from his sleeve, which was used to contact Princess Zhanglu. With a point of his finger, a beam of light shot into the talisman. But after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was no movement from the talisman. Wu Qi was shocked. This talisman was refined by him after he had the cultivation of a golden immortal. Even if they were 1,000,000,000,000 miles apart, he could quickly contact Princess Zhanglu. Now, the talismans didn't respond at all. Either the talismans in Princess Zhongli's hands were destroyed, or there was an array formation that isolated the response between the talismans. Regardless of the situation, Princess Zhongli's current situation was not good. Wu Qi quickly sent his divine sense in the direction of the East Sea province. The divine sense of a second-tier gold immortal could not reach the level where he could see everything in the universe at a glance, but any second-tier gold immortal could easily cover an entire galaxy with his divine sense. On Pangu continent, a divine sense of this level could easily cover at least 1,000 provinces. The East Sea province was not far from Zhong province, separated by only a dozen provinces. As Wu Qi's divine sense was far stronger than that of an ordinary second-tier gold immortal, he immediately knew everything that was happening in the East Sea province. Lord Xiancheng was training his army under the East Sea, while his father was drinking and having fun with a few old dragon kings in the Great Hall. The few old dragon kings were holding beautiful dragon girls and clam demons in their arms, as if they were preparing to give Lord Xiancheng a few younger brothers and sisters. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were lying on a pile of dead beasts, snoring loudly as if they were sleepwalking, opening their mouths from time to devour the bodies. It had been more than a year since they last saw each other, and the brothers had grown much fatter, especially their bellies, which were dozens of times thicker than the rest of their bodies. Catfish lay sprawled in a remote pool in the East Sea province. A group of aquatic demons from Underhand's sect was wiping her scales and pouring vats of wine into her mouth. Beside the pool, a tiger demon who had lived for many years was seriously grilling fat and sheep. From time to time, some little demons would rush over and quickly grab the meat that was spitting grease and feed it into Catfish's mouth. Other longbow people were farming in the valleys where they lived, and some men and women were working hard in broad daylight to make the longbow people flourish. Patriarch Jiang Yun and a few other old immortals were sitting under an ancient pine tree at the top of a mountain, smiling and pointing out the scenery of the world. Everything in the East Sea province was normal, but Princess Xianglu was nowhere to be seen. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of needle tips as he quickly scanned the surroundings with his divine will. Before long, he discovered a dense clump of dark mist that covered 10,000 miles in circumference above Yuanzhou City in the province ruled by Yi clan. Dark clouds rolled, and chilly winds kept blowing out of them. Nearly half of the province's territory was blanketed by Xianbing, and the area of over 1 billion miles in circumference was a world of ice and snow. Countless people had died of cold and starvation. From time to time, wisps of gold element energy would soar into the sky from the dark cloud, accompanied by a muffled, thunderous zither tune. Wu Qi recognized the gold element energy and the zither tune. They were the attacks unleashed by Princess Zhang Li's silver lotus and immortal zither. On that dark cloud, 100 miles tall god sat cross-legged in a puff of dark mist. Two ferocious black flood dragons hovered around him, breathing large streams of cold mist into the dark cloud down below from time to time. The god's hands were locked into a strange incantation gesture, turning the natural energy in the surroundings into a dreadful cold air and sealing off all directions. His body was covered with a thick layer of ice. Obviously, he was the culprit who caused the world of ice and snow. Wu Qi sent his divine will into the dark cloud, but the cold air made his divine will feel very uncomfortable, and he could not see what was hiding in the dark cloud. The fact that the dark cloud could isolate Wu Qi's divine will showed that it was the main reason why he could not contact Princess Xianglu. Snorting coldly, Wu Qi transformed into a bolt of lightning and darted towards the dark cloud. At the same time, he spread his divine will out like a huge net, trying to find out why the god had invaded the territory of Diyu, but no army of Diyu had gone to fight against him. With a glance, Wu Qi immediately found a small group of heavily armored elite soldiers stationed at the edge of the province, about 1,000 miles away. Occasionally, some patrolling soldiers from nearby provinces would approach the border of this province, but the soldiers stationed at the border would immediately drive them away. The official tokens in their hands seemed to have great authority, as none of the patrolling soldiers from other provinces dared to disobey their orders. As for the messengers sent out by the local officials of this province, Wu Qi had also found their whereabouts. In some remote valleys, he found a large number of chopped corpses, all wearing the robes of low-grade officials of Diyu, or armors. Obviously, they were messengers sent out to inform the higher-grade officials of the changes in this place. However, the soldiers stationed at the border had intercepted and killed them. That was why the god could set up a formation to trap Princess Xianglu and her companions without any scruples. "Bastard," cursed Wu Qi in a low voice. Obviously, someone in Diyu had colluded with the god, and was helping him cover up the news. Quickly spreading his divine sense toward the god, Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the land like a comb. All of a sudden, Wu Qi found a splendid field headquarters on the top of a mountain about 100,000 miles away from the god. King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang were sitting under a huge flagpole, drinking and chatting with each other. A few expert chefs were removing various precious ingredients from the bodies of some struggling and roaring demon immortals, cooking delicious dishes for King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang on the spot. A few demon immortals who had reverted to their original forms were left on the hillside, roaring hoarsely as they twisted and struggled on the ground. But how could they move when their cultivation bases were destroyed and most of their organs were taken away and cooked? "It's you again, King Zhangqiu." Wu Qi gritted his teeth in anger. His divine sense turned into a thin needle and plunged into the tent behind King Zhangqiu, only to find that Lord Longyang was sitting behind the table in the tent, handling all kinds of official documents for King Zhangqiu. Wu Qi was taken aback for a moment, and then a surge of anger rushed straight to his head. He did not care about the relationship between Lord Longyang and King Zhangqiu, but as Wu Qi's ally, Lord Longyang had made an agreement to help each other. Yet, when King Zhangqiu plotted against Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, Lord Longyang seemed to be calm and did not show any reaction. This made Wu Qi feel betrayed. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi stomped his feet on the ground, causing a huge underground energy vein to twitch. Abruptly, his body tore through the void and appeared over the god's head hundreds of millions of miles away. With a clear cry, beams of green light shot out from 12 of his vital meridians, and 12 transparent Kunwu swords flew out soundlessly, each as light as a goose feather. All the Pangu's sacred energy in his body was injected into the swords, which immediately made them extremely heavy. With a wave of his hand, Wu Qi poured a great amount of earth element energy from the void into the swords. The 12 swords formed a small sword formation, emitting the unique aura of a towering mountain as they slashed down at the god. Using the 12 swords to form a small fiend-slaying sword formation, using earth element energy as the core driving force, and using the will of earth restraining water to attack the god who was obviously born of the law of water, there was no doubt that Wu Qi's understanding of the fiend-slaying sword formation had reached a certain level. As the Kunwu swords fell, the god looked up in horror at the green sword beam coming down from above and cried out in a hoarse voice, Is this Kunwu sword? Clearly in a panic, the god raised both hands to block the sword beam. A miserable howl rang out as the incomparably sharp and heavy Kunwu sword cut off the god's arms from the shoulders like a sharp knife cutting through tofu. The momentum of the swords did not dissipate, and they went straight into the god's body. The 12 Kunwu swords pierced through his waist and abdomen, smashed his internal organs like a hot knife through butter, and came out from the bottom of his abdomen. The earth element energy invaded the god's body, suppressed the rich water energy in him, destroyed his body, and even began to shake the core of his divine body, the law of heaven and earth that was his origin. Countless cracks of various sizes appeared on the god's body, from which billowing black water gushed out of them with loud rumbling noises. For a moment, it was as if dozens of rivers were gushing out of his body at the same time. It was a very strange scene. Every drop of black water was the god's divine power. Even though his body was now 100 miles tall and his true form was 10,000 miles long, he could not withstand such a consumption. The god let out a terrified curse, then hurriedly transformed into a black wave and rushed up into the sky. But, as the 12 Kunwu swords spun slightly, hundreds of small yellow mountains immediately appeared in the sky. These mountains were all condensed of earth element energy and driven by the fiend-slaying sword formation, which gave them endless magical effects. Each of them emanated a strong suction force, constantly drawing large amounts of black water from the god's body and rapidly consuming his divine power and life force. At last, the god could not hold back the horror in his heart. He roared, opened his mouth, and spat out a pitch-black trident, thrusting it at Wu Qi. Chapter 784. At the top of the mountain, King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang were drinking together. Wiping the wine stain from the corner of his mouth, Liu Bang stroked the long leg of the fairy standing next to him, narrowed his eyes, and said with a smile, I wonder how long it will take that Gonggang Huang to capture that group of people. I've trapped them with the formation for days, but why hasn't anything happened yet? King Zhangqiu smiled faintly and shook his head indifferently. No matter how long it will take him, as long as Gonggang Huang kills Yu Miao and his companions, then sends him to wreak havoc in other places, it will be a done deal. Whether Gonggang Huang can return alive in the end, or he is killed by the other experts of Diyu, the result will not make any difference. Sighing, King Zhangqiu looked up at the sky and suddenly asked in a cold voice, Is that old hag still not willing to lower her head and admit defeat? Liu Bang narrowed his eyes, also looking up at the sky, and said in a low voice, Your Highness, you're a cautious man. She is the creator of the human race, and now she has the myriad spirit cauldron in her hand. Every year, the newborn human souls are all under her control. While chuckling, Liu Bang toyed with the slender and tender body of the fairy standing next to him and said in a flat voice, She has been worshipped by the human race for so many years, and she is used to being in a high and mighty position. It will be difficult for her to agree to our plan in a short time. After all, with her identity, it is very difficult to make her lower her head. TSK, if the plan succeeds, as long as I can get a little share of the great virtues, it will be enough for me to break through the realm of primordial, won't it? Liu Bang laughed complacently, while King Zhangqiu squinted at the sky and did not say a word. When Liu Bang saw the look on King Zhangqiu's face, he laughed as well. Don't worry, Your Highness. Although Your Highness is not the only candidate, with my help, there is still a great chance that Your Highness will sit on the throne in the future. When that time comes, even I will have to address you as Your Majesty. King Zhangqiu snorted unhappily. Twitching his mouth sulkily, he picked up the cup and took a gulp of wine. He grumbled in a low voice, "That's not what you said when you found me and my father." Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and smiled, completely ignoring King Zhangqiu's words. King Zhangqiu grumbled, but when he saw that Lu Bang was indifferent and did not say anything, he could only take another sip of wine sulkily. Just as the two of them were secretly calculating in their hearts, a mournful howl suddenly came from afar. The two of them jumped up in shock and cast their secret techniques to look in that direction, just in time to see Wu Qi chopping off both of Gonggang Huang's arms. The green sword light shot into Gonggang Huang's body, churning his internal organs into mush before spurting out from his abdomen. Black water gushed out of Gonggang Huang's body, rolling and spreading wildly across the land. In just the space of a few breaths, the black water that sprayed out of Gonggang Huang's body had spread hundreds of thousands of miles. Black waves that were tens of thousands of feet high rolled over and slammed heavily on the lofty mountain where King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang were drinking and having fun. The tremendous impact shook the top of the mountain, causing many female immortals to cry out in alarm, and some even fell to the ground in embarrassment. Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu looked at each other in horror. Lu Bang gave Wu Qi a look, who was controlling the sword formation to trap and kill Gonggang Huang, and said with a dry laugh, "That Tan Lang is still able to come back after being sucked into the void." Never mind, the matter here is almost over. It would be best if Gonggang Huang is dead. I still have important matters to attend to. Time to go. Pointing a finger at the sky-veiling flag of chaos, Lu Bang stepped on a dark cloud and sped away, wrapping the female immortals in it. King Zhangqiu pondered for a moment, then suddenly laughed coldly. He sat back in his seat and said in a low voice, "I'll be watching from here. Do you think that Tan Lang, a mere marquis of a province, dares to do anything to me? Someone, call back the soldiers on the border, open the border, and spread the news that Gonggang Huang has killed the entire Yi clan and hundreds of millions of innocent people." King Zhangqiu clapped his hands lightly and said in a cold voice, "Lord Longyang, send an official letter to Gonggang, the Flame Emperor's subordinate, and ask him why he didn't control his subordinates and allowed him to stir up trouble in Diyu. Complain to His Majesty, and tell him that the human race is the descendant of Yan Emperor. Why is his subordinate killing so many innocent people?" Narrowing his eyes and smiling, King Zhangqiu glanced at Lu Bang, who was fleeing on a dark cloud, and said coldly, "I can't believe you can come up with such a messy plan. All the emperors are involved, and you're trying to throw the world into chaos." On the other side, Wu Qi controlled the fiend's slaying sword formation and condensed hundreds of mountains with earth element energy to suppress Gonggang Huang. Sword beams rained down like raindrops, each containing a powerful earth element energy, causing great damage to Gonggang Huang's body. The earth element energy accumulated in Gonggang Huang's body was like a blocked canal, making it difficult for him to circulate his divine power, and his resistance grew weaker and weaker. On top of that, both of Gonggang Huang's arms were cut off by Wu Qi, so he could only chant an incantation to control the water vapor in the air and turn it into waves to protect himself. How could he have the strength to fight back? The trident he spat out of his mouth was a very powerful weapon, a natal divine artifact that had accompanied him since he was born. But, it was useless against Wu Qi. 12 small yellow mountains had trapped it, and 3 Kunwu swords were wheeling around it. The heavy pressure made it impossible for the trident to move, so how could it threaten Wu Qi? The sword beams kept hacking at Gonggang Huang's body. All of a sudden, he let out a miserable shriek as both of his legs were cut off. As soon as his legs touched the ground, they immediately turned into huge waves that spread out in all directions. For a moment, the water within a radius of 1,000,000 miles was 30 miles deep. Gonggang Huang's legs had turned into a vast ocean, wreaking havoc in all directions, drowning countless living beings. Gonggang Huang shrieked in pain. He stared at Wu Qi and snapped, "I am a general under the command of the water god, Gong. Do you really dare to kill me? Wu Qi looked at Gong Huang coldly. He unleashed a stream of purple mist, causing the two Kunwu swords to fall from the sky. Two beams of green light slashed at the necks of Gong Huang's flood dragons. Blood sprayed out, and the huge dragon heads were thrown dozens of miles away. The miserable shrieks of the flood dragons shook the water below, raising waves that were more than 100 miles high. Amidst the dark mist, several thousand black flags fluttering in the air exploded with a deafening boom. A silver lotus flower unleashed a ring of silver light that measured tens of miles in circumference, shielding Princess Zhonglu and the others as they soared into the sky and broke out of the formation. With the power of the formation, Gong Huang had trapped Princess Zhonglu and her companions. But, the silver lotus was an innate treasure, and Princess Zhonglu was proficient in the interpromotion and restraint of the 5 elements. Apart from a little bit of energy being worn away by the formation, Princess Zhonglu and her companions were unharmed. Seeing Wu Qi chasing after Gong Huang with the sword beams, Princess Zhonglu let out a cry of joy. She put away the silver lotus and flew into Wu Qi's arms like a bird returning to its nest. Wu Qi laughed and kissed her in front of Yu Miao and the others, sucking hard on Princess Zhongli's red lips. Wu Qi waved his hands, and the 9 Kunwu swords fell down in the direction of the 9 palaces, cutting Gong Huang's body in two. Terrified, Gong Huang transformed his body into a wave of water, turning the 2 halves of his body into 2 water balls and merging them inwards. He was about to use a mystic art to merge his body back into one. But, the Kunwu swords were divine artifacts, and the severed body had lost most of its vitality. No matter how hard Gong Huang tried, he could not put his broken body back together. He threw his head back and gave a long howl, then bellowed, "Damn you! You've slaughtered my divine beasts, and now you're trying to kill me." "I'll definitely." Wu Qi did not give Gong Huang a chance to curse him. These ancient gods were the embodiment of the laws of heaven and earth, and their curses before they died contained a terrible power that could affect the great Tao of heaven and earth. If he was not careful, he could be severely wounded by their curses. Wu Qi pointed a finger out, and the 12 Kunwu swords shot out at the same time, piercing through Gong Huang's 7 orifices and all the vital parts of his upper body. Earth element energy burst out of him, exploding him into countless water bubbles that splattered in all directions. Then, he struck out with his sword and cut the wailing trident into 2. After killing Gong Huang with the help of the Kunwu swords and fiend-slaying sword formation, Wu Qi looked coldly at Yu Miao and his companions. Nestled in Wu Qi's arms, Princess Zhonglu quickly explained Yu Miao's background. Wu Qi sneered. The Kunwu sword spun rapidly, trapping Yu Miao and his companions in a wall of green sword beams. As the water that Gong Huang had transformed into was sucked into the sword beams, they turned pale black in an instant and began to emit a bone-piercing cold air. Yu Miao's gourd could shoot out flaming flying swords to hurt people, so Wu Qi had attached the water element energy to the sword beams to attack him. By using water to suppress fire, he could weaken the power of Yu Miao's gourd to the greatest extent. A strong cold air spread in all directions and struck at Yu Miao's precious gourd. The collision of water and fire produced muffled thunderclaps, and from time to time, water vapor and sparks flew out in all directions. Yu Miao's body trembled. He sensed an aura stronger than his from Wu Qi, and the aura emanating from the 12 Kunwu swords under Wu Qi's control made him shudder with fear. He gave Wu Qi a terrified look, gritted his teeth, and growled, "It's either you or me today. Remember this, Yu Miao. You've plotted to seize the foundation of Yu clan in Zhong province, and I'll fight you to the death. If I'm spared today, you'd better be vigilant at all times in the future." Yu Miao was a ruthless and decisive man. After shouting a few words, he spat a mouthful of blood on his precious gourd. In the blink of an eye, the fire gourd expanded to a few miles in size, and a vast amount of flame burst out of it. Wisps of destructive aura kept rushing out of the gourd, pushing Yu Miao and the others back in a flurry. Wu Qi was taken aback. This old fellow actually detonated his natal magical artifact. Judging from its quality, the fire gourd was at least an innate spirit artifact, and if it were to explode, the force would be enough to destroy an entire province. Not daring to be careless, Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhanglu and brought the dark-Yin celestial tower whistling up from the top of his head, pulling Yu Miao and the others into it. Then, together with Princess Zhanglu, they broke through the void and rushed to the top of the lofty mountain where King Zhangqiu was. Grinning hideously, Yu Miao controlled the gourd, which had already entered the countdown to self-detonation, and chased after Wu Qi. Amidst King Zhangqiu's sonorous and almost mad curses, Wu Qi came to his side, and then the deadly fire gourd smashed straight into the mountain. A beam of red light soared into the sky, and Yu Miao had detonated his natal magical artifact. The red light, raging flames, and countless sword beams shot out in all directions. For a moment, the world turned crimson, and nothing could be seen. Chapter 785. Yu Miao's prime magical artifact, the fire gourd, was obtained by him in a desolate mountain somewhere on Pangu continent, which had just expanded after absorbing the primal energy, after he had abandoned his human body to cultivate the immortal Tao in secret. The mountain had just been born from the chaos, and contained the great Tao of primordial. It was condensed from the energy of 5 metals, and beneath it was a poisonous cave of earth fire, which gave birth to a wisp of innate fire energy. Nourished by the energy of fire and metal, a gourd vine sprouted behind the mountain, with the fire gourd growing on it. Yu Miao obtained the opportunity, and the fire gourd was taken away by another itinerant immortal. After obtaining the gourd, he refined it day and night with his blood essence and nascent divinity, nourishing and growing the wisp of innate fire energy in it. Meanwhile, the wisp of innate killing energy in the gourd transformed into countless flying swords, tempered by the power of fire energy day and night, making them extraordinarily sharp and ferocious. When fighting an enemy, even an ordinary gold immortal would be burned to ashes with just a single flame. But when the flying swords flew out of the gourd, no one except an upper-grade or supreme-grade gold immortal artifact could withstand a single blow from them. Yu Miao was scared out of his wits when he saw Wu Qi's divine weapon, the Kunwa swords, and saw Wu Qi was able to lay out the fiend-slaying sword formation, the legendary sword formation of the human race's patriarch. That was why he decided to detonate his natal magical artifact at all costs, hoping that he, Yu Miao, and the other juniors could escape. The gourd was thrown out and locked onto Wu Qi's self-detonation, while Yu Miao broke through the void and fled in panic with Yu Miao and the others. Following Wu Qi, the fire gourd flew tens of thousands of miles away, hitting the mountaintop where King Zhangqiu was hiding, and exploded with a deafening boom, releasing the wisp of innate fire energy, the boundless killing energy, and the energy of 5 metals in the gourd. Poor King Zhangqiu, who was sitting on the mountaintop with a large group of attendants and generals just a moment ago, thought Wu Qi would not dare to do anything to him even if he found him. So, when Lu Bang sneaked away, he stayed calmly, waiting to embarrass Wu Qi later. But, he never dreamed that Yu Miao would be so desperate. The natal magical artifact of an immortal was so important, and yet, he exploded it just like that. On the other hand, Wu Qi was extremely cunning. He had brought the fire gourd and come straight to him. Initially, the self-explosion had nothing to do with him, but now, Wu Qi had dragged him into it. As he stared blankly at the huge fire gourd smashing down, King Zhangqiu cried out in alarm. He was about to ask the generals around him to react, but it was too late. The shell of the fire gourd, condensed purely of innate fire energy, burst into flames and spread in all directions, while the wisp of innate fire energy, the boundless killing energy, and the energy of 5 metals in it burst out with a boom. For a moment, the area tens of thousands of miles around was restored to its primordial state by the terrible force of the explosion. Apart from the innate 5 elements, there was no other natural energy. All the mountains, hills, flowers, trees, rivers, lakes, and seas, birds and beasts, everything within tens of thousands of miles was melted into nothingness. All the beings born of acquired natural energy were devoured by the innate fire energy and gold energy at the same time. The 2 innate energies enveloped, devoured, and destroyed everything. As far as the eye could see, there was only red and white light. King Zhangqiu roared. He had no time to care about the lives of his trusted generals and generals behind him. A beam of red light shot up into the sky from the top of his head, and the soul of Bashya, one of the 9 sons of the dragon, emerged. With a dragon head and a turtle body, Bashya was over 100,000 feet long, unleashing a thick black curtain of light that enveloped King Zhangqiu. Wu Qi saw it coming. By luring the exploding fire gourd to King Zhangqiu, he immediately produced all 108 Kunwu swords and formed a sword formation to protect the people around him. Dark Yin's celestial tower flew out whistling, emitting beams of starlight that fused into the sword formation. The fiend-slaying sword formation was all-encompassing, and it had the ability to derive the universe and create the power of chaos. After the 108,000 innate stars Wu Qi obtained from the kaleidoscopic star core transformed into starlight and fused into the sword formation, the Kunwu swords immediately transformed into countless dazzling starlight that flowed in all directions like fireflies, defending the void around Wu Qi and the others like an impregnable fortress. The raging fire energy and gold energy from the outside world could not invade at all. The fire gourd exploded, unleashing innate fire energy that could burn everything in the world. The wisp of innate killing energy and the energy essence of the 5 metals transformed into countless white beams of light that streaked across the sky. When the innate fire energy touched the acquired objects, they immediately turned into wisps of smoke and drifted away, while King Zhangqiu's trusted generals and tens of thousands of soldiers were pierced through by the white beams of light. Their bodies were riddled with sieves, and they howled miserably as they were torn into the tiniest particles by the killing energy. The red light and white smoke blanketed tens of thousands of miles in circumference. Fortunately, the structure of Pangu continent was very different from that of the outer heavenly realms. Every rock on Pangu continent was thousands of times stronger and heavier than that of the outer heavenly realms, and even the structure of the space around it was much more stable than that of outer heavenly realms. The explosion of an innate spirit artifact could only affect a radius of tens of thousands of miles, and its terrible explosive force was gradually absorbed and melted by Pangu continent. The raging fire and gold gas turned into red and white smoke and were sucked into Pangu continent, no longer as destructive as they were when the explosion occurred. If it were in outer heavenly realms, the explosion of such an innate spirit artifact was enough to destroy a vast area where dozens of stars were located. But on Pangu continent, the destructive force was compressed to the minimum. Wu Qi was protected by the sword formation and the law of stars, so he did not feel tired at all. Although he was at the center of the explosion, the power of Kunwu swords and the sword formation was so great that the explosion could not even shake the sword beam he unleashed, let alone hurt Wu Qi. King Zhangqiu, on the other hand, was overjoyed. His heart was bleeding as he watched his trusted subordinates die tragically. The generals that accompanied him were all retainers that he had served for generations. They were all carefully selected geniuses that had grown up together with him. Basically, they had been in the same boat ever since they were young. Not to mention the relationship between a ruler and a subject, they had even developed a brotherly bond. Although King Zhangqiu was harsh and ruthless, he could not help but feel a heartache when he saw these trusted subordinates, who had followed him for hundreds of years and whose cultivation bases were above the second Pangu heaven, turned into smoke in the raging flame, or were pierced through by countless white beams of light and riddled with holes. The thick light barrier unleashed by the soul of Bashya could only protect him alone, and even so, it was melting in the flame and shaking under the impact of the white beams of light. Each of the white beams of light transformed from the innate killing energy and the energy essence of 5 metals had an amazing penetrating power. Although the soul of Bashya, which King Zhangqiu had fused with when he was young, had the cultivation base of a peak-level gold immortal, it was just a beast's soul after all, not Bashya himself. Even though Bashya was famous for his strength among the 9 sons of the dragon, he could only barely self-detonate. Every white beam of light that slammed into the defensive barrier shook King Zhangqiu's internal organs violently. When he saw his trusted generals die tragically in the flame, he felt a sharp pain in his heart, and could not help but shed tears. Tan Lang! You vile man! I swear I'll kill you! Flustered and exasperated, King Zhangqiu spun around and glared at Wu Qi, who was less than 1,000 feet away from him. Through the thick layer of flaming clouds, Wu Qi's face became hazy and vague. King Zhangqiu clenched his jaws and pointed a finger at Wu Qi. A trickle of blood slowly trickled down the corner of his mouth, and his face was twisted like a devil's. Amidst the deafening rumble that sounded as if the heaven and the earth were toppling, Wu Qi heard King Zhangqiu's roar. He chuckled, pointed at King Zhangqiu, and made a gesture of cutting his neck. "Now that things have come to this, do you think I'll let you live?" he said coldly. Wu Qi clearly remembered how Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu had thrown him into the boundless void with the sky-veiling flag of chaos. If not for Prince Changqing's guidance in the ghost realm, who knew where he would have drifted to? Without detailed coordinates, ordinary immortals would never be able to escape once they were sucked into the boundless void. It was true that Lu Bang was ruthless, but without King Zhangqiu's help, Lu Bang would not have dared to attack the Marquis of Diyu outside Yuxiong Plain. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi murmured something to Princess Zhanglu in a low voice. Princess Zhanglu smiled faintly as the five-colored divine ray behind her suddenly waved. A muffled rumble rang out as it ripped apart the raging innate flame between Wu Qi and King Zhangqiu, wiping out the thousands of metal energy essences that were piercing through the air at high speed. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi opened his mouth. The blood centipede sword, an innate spirit artifact, transformed into a red centipede-shaped sword beam that was less than a foot long, and shot straight toward King Zhangqiu's forehead. Then, the natural phenomena medallion rose into the sky with a strong light, and a vast cloud of smoke that was wrapped in all kinds of twisting mountains and rivers that looked like a painting came whistling out. It arrived before the blood centipede sword and smashed onto the black light screen unleashed by the soul of Baxia. The natural phenomena medallion was a supreme magical artifact personally crafted by the sacred emperor, Xuanqiu, and possessed an extremely terrifying power. The smoke emitted by the natural phenomena medallion tore open a small gap about an inch wide in the black light screen, through which the blood centipede sword flashed. In King Zhangqiu's horrified and incredulous eyes, the sword pierced through his forehead, destroyed his soul, and came out from the back of his head. "How dare you kill me?" Those were King Zhangqiu's last words in the world. Wu Qi laughed grimly and said, "Killing you is nothing more than killing a chicken. I hate bastards like you who betray me and hook up with outsiders the most." As the sword beam flashed, Wu Qi retracted the blood centipede sword. The soul of Baxia threw its head back and hissed sadly. Just as it was about to transform into a beam of black light and flee into transmigration, Ao Buzan leaped out greedily from Wu Qi's sleeve, opened his mouth, and swallowed the soul of Baxia, who was caught off guard. The soul of a peak-level gold immortal, a great tonic. Ao Buzan's eyes were brimming with tears of excitement. Is there such a good thing waiting for Lao Tzu in the world? Wonderful. With this soul, Lao Tzu can restore at least 1% of his cultivation base in his previous life. Wu Qi stared at Ao Buzan in horror. This fellow had once again revealed his secret. If the soul of a peak-level gold immortal could only restore 1% of his cultivation base, then before he was skinned and made into a storage ring, he had already, without the protection of the soul of Baxia, King Zhangqiu's body was exposed to the flame produced by the self-explosion of the fire gourd. His strong fleshly body, which had been tempered 1,000 times, lasted less than 3 seconds in the flame before it was quickly turned into a wisp of smoke and dissipated. King Zhangqiu of Diyu was dead. Suddenly, Wu Qi cried out, "Somebody, send an urgent document to His Majesty at once. Yu Miao from the Yu clan of Zhong province has rebelled, and he has joined hands with Yu Miao and other rebels to kill King Zhangqiu. I, Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, request His Majesty to arrest Yu Miao and his accomplices in the territory of Diyu." Yu Miao and his companions were the scapegoats for what had happened. Chapter 786. After Wu Qi killed King Zhangqiu with a single sword strike, Lu Bang, who had fled hundreds of millions of miles away, suddenly gave a cold snort. He rolled up his sleeve and saw that one of the 12 red jade beads he wore on his left wrist had exploded into pieces, and tiny bits of jade powder were slipping off his wrist. Zhang Liang, who was following closely behind Lu Bang, frowned and said with a cold grin, King Zhangqiu is dead. What an obedient chess piece. Liu Bang patted his wrist indifferently and said in a flat voice, he is just a chess piece. It doesn't matter if he is dead or not. It's good that he is dead. With him dead, no one will compete with that person for the right of succession, and he will have to listen to us obediently. Baring his teeth and sighing, Liu Bang narrowed his eyes and muttered in a low voice, this King Zhangqiu has a few beautiful concubines. I wanted to flirt with them a long time ago, but I couldn't do it because of this dead man. According to De Yu's rules, these concubines can remarry. I'm a descendant of a noble family. Tisk, it's a great honor for them to marry me and be my concubines. Zhang Liang smiled faintly. Like Liu Bang, they did not take King Zhangqiu's death seriously, as if he was a dead dog. They never lacked people they could use, and King Zhangqiu was just one of them, not even the most important one. Gently stroking the remaining 11 red jade beads on the string, Liu Bang smiled faintly and shook his head gently. The sky-veiling flag of chaos let out a shrill cry, then abruptly transformed into a shadow and tore through the void. In the blink of an eye, the group of people sped hundreds of millions of miles away, heading straight for Liangzhu. The destructive force produced by the explosion was gradually absorbed by Pangu continent, and even the huge bottomless pit created by Gonggang Huang was gradually recovering. The ground was wriggling visibly, rapidly repairing the damage caused by Gonggang Huang and Yu Miao. Wu Qi retracted the fiend-slaying sword formation, and the green Kunwu swords flew back into his vital acupoints to be nourished by his blood essence. At the same time, they kept absorbing the rich Pangu sacred energy in the outside world and feeding it back to Wu Qi. The Dark Yin celestial tower spat out Yu Mu, Huang Liang, and the others, followed by the huge jade armor dark turtle flying ship. Huang Liang and the others felt like they were having a nightmare. They were still in the ghost realm when they fainted, and when they woke up, Wu Qi had brought them back to Pangu continent. Streaks of cold light flickered in the distance, and groups of flying boats rushed over like crazy. Just now, King Zhangqiu's trusted soldiers had sealed off the border so that the neighboring provinces could not detect what was going on here. But now, King Zhangqiu was dead, all his trusted generals were killed, and all his generals were fleeing in disarray. The commotion here was so great that all the provinces and counties in the vicinity had sent their elites here to investigate. Wu Qi scratched his head in distress. The prefecture overseer of a 6th-grade province, Yi Clan, was killed, hundreds of cities vanished into thin air, and such a huge bottomless pit was dug out of the ground. Coupled with the explosion of the fire gourd, it seemed to be a big trouble. After exchanging his confession with Yu Mu as fast as he could and putting all the blame on Yu Mu, Wu Qi did not bother to shout at the soldiers of De Yu who were rushing over. He hurriedly drove the Dark Yin celestial tower, broke through the void, and brought Princess Xianglu, Huang Liang, and the others toward the East Sea province. Yu Miao stayed where he was and gave these officials an explanation, while at the same time making the blame on Yu Miao's head darker and tighter. The only thing that surprised Wu Qi was that when the fire gourd exploded, he did not discover Lord Long Yang's whereabouts. Could it be that he had successfully escaped? But, Wu Qi was busy dealing with King Zhangqiu at that time, and did not have time to keep an eye on Lord Long Yang, so he did not know how Lord Long Yang escaped. Suddenly, Wu Qi had an unfathomable feeling about Lord Long Yang, and he made up his mind to pay more attention to him. Halfway through the journey, Wu Qi dismissed the soldiers sent by Gao and asked them to report what had happened here to Gao. In order to thank them for their hard work in hunting down Yu Mu and his companions with Princess Xianglu, Wu Qi gave them a lot of benefits. Of course, he gave them a lot of gold and silver, as well as a lot of the specialties he brought from the ghost realm. After being fed by Wu Qi, the soldiers sent by Gao returned to Liangzhu happily. Especially when they learned that Wu Qi had killed King Zhangqiu, it was great news to Gao. If they reported the news to Gao, he would definitely reward them handsomely. Ever since Gao was conferred the title of king, King Zhangqiu and Gao had been rivals. They had clashed with each other countless times, both openly and secretly. Gao would be very happy to know that King Zhangqiu was dead. Breaking through the void with Dark-Ean's celestial tower was a mighty divine ability that only the supreme oracles on Pangu continent could possess. Wu Qi spared no energy to keep activating the void-breaking formation in the tower and flying forward. Princess Xianglu happened to be by his side. Princess Xianglu could gather the natural energy to replenish Wu Qi's energy at any time, so he could travel through the void without stopping. In just a few hours, when the sun rose in the east and the people of East Sea Province began to go out to work, Wu Qi and his company returned to the East Sea Province, which was much different from before. After giving Huang Liang and others great rewards, Wu Qi asked them to return to their camps to rest and enjoy themselves, while he and Princess Xianglu went to the newly built prefecture overseer mansion and summoned the people around Wu Qi. Today's East Sea Province was very different from the East Sea County that Yuzong had given to Wu Qi. Back then, although the East Sea Province was vast, it was only 30% of the total land of a province, and its population was only a few million. After years of hard work by Wu Qi, and under the influence of Gao, King Yufeng, Gao, the East Sea Province was given a large amount of uninhabited land from several neighboring provinces, which was as large as 4 or 5 neighboring provinces combined. Since Wu Qi was conferred the title of third-grade Marquis of Province by Emperor Haozuan, the East Sea Province was designated as a third-grade province under Diyu. Third-grade provinces had strict population requirements, so during the days when Wu Qi was away, the officials of Diyu began to immigrate people from the 300 provinces ruled by Zhong Province to the East Sea Province. Among the 300 provinces, the second-grade and third-grade provinces gave Wu Qi a population of 1 billion to 8 billion, while the 8th-grade and 9th-grade provinces gave Wu Qi a population of 3 to 5 million. Although the East Sea Province was not as populous as those prosperous provinces, it still had a population of nearly 100 billion. A population of 100 billion was not enough to fill the vast East Sea Province. In fact, all the people lived on the peninsula that stretched tens of thousands of miles into the sea, where the East Sea City was located. Recently, Princess Xianglu had been busy finding trouble with Yu Miao, so she did not pay any attention to the daily affairs of the East Sea Province. Fortunately, there was Lu Qingfeng, a hard-working and diligent chief executive. He had worked hard day and night, and finally managed to get the daily affairs of the East Sea Province in order. At the moment, the East Sea Province was divided into 1,000 provinces by Lu Qingfeng, each of which had nearly 1,000 cities of various sizes, and the division of villages and towns was well organized. After all, it was a new city built on a barren land, so the planning of the cities and towns was as neat as a chessboard for Qiqi, and it was carried out in the most convenient way. The county governors and the daily administrative officials of 1,000 provinces were all the sons of Great Yan's imperial clan and aristocratic clan selected by Lu Qingfeng. Apart from Lu Qingfeng, Princess Xianglu had a very high status in Great Yan imperial clan, and all these members of the imperial clan were her grandchildren. With Princess Xianglu as their leader, the loyalty of these members of the imperial clan was unquestionable. On the other hand, these sons of aristocratic clans were the foppish sons whom Lu Qingfeng had befriended in the past, and they had a deep friendship with Lu Qingfeng, so it was easy for him to use them. These people did not know Wu Qi, and they had no affection for Wu Qi, let alone loyalty to Wu Qi. But, Wu Qi did not care about that. He only needed them to manage the affairs in their own territories, and he would not care about anything else. Lu Qingfeng was his brother, and Princess Xianglu was his lover. As long as these people were loyal to Lu Qingfeng and Princess Xianglu, everything would be fine. As for other things like seizing the foundation of Great Yan, Wu Qi was not worried at all. The military power of East Sea Province was in the hands of Wu Qi, and the strongest combat force was under Wu Qi's control. He himself was the strongest existence in East Sea Province. As long as he held the spear tightly, would he be afraid of someone seizing his foundation? A fiend immortal with the cultivation base of a first-tier heaven immortal could slaughter more than 100 billion mortals with just a top-grade fiend artifact. In the eyes of an expert like Wu Qi, mortals were just mortals, just a concept of numbers. It was a joke to say that mortals could threaten someone like Wu Qi. Besides, Wu Qi had the method to break the black celestial forbidden curse, and his backer was the Prince of Diyu. Now, he even had a relationship with the sacred emperor of the human race. With such a strong background, why would he need to be afraid that he could not control the affairs of East Sea Province? In the prefecture overseer mansion, Wu Qi summoned Lu Qingfeng, Lord Xiansheng, the Dragon King of East Sea, Catfish Flood Dragon, Patriarch Jiang Yun, the elders of Long Bo Kingdom, and other important figures to discuss the future development of East Sea Province with them. According to Wu Qi's highest instruction, East Sea Province only needed to focus on two things in the future. First, have more children. Whether it was the demons of East Sea, the demons of Underhand Sect, the common people of East Sea Province, or the people of Long Bo Kingdom, they all had to work hard to have children. Wu Qi would come up with generous rewards for those families that had more than 3 children. The more children they had, the more rewards they would get. Second, accumulate more troops. Whether it was the navy of East Sea, the cultivators of Underhand Sect, the immortals under Patriarch Jiang Yun and Daoist Qing Xian, or the other powers in Wu Qi's territory, they all had to work hard to train their armies. How could they survive on Panga continent without a strong army? Especially when Wu Qi had learned the fiend-slaying sword formation, which was all-encompassing. No matter how many troops there were, they could enter it to enhance its power. After asking for their opinions, Wu Qi divided the responsibilities of his subordinates. In the future, when Wu Qi ascended to a position that no one could imagine today, the people around him would still bear the same power and responsibilities as today. But by then, these people, who were still unknown on Panga continent today, would have their names spread all over the universe. Chapter 787. Princess Zhanglu possessed the bloodline of an ancient heaven god, who could control the natural energies of earth, water, fire, and wind. She could communicate with ghosts, spirits, mountains, and water ghosts, and form the golden body of the god of Scourge. She was appointed as the Great Oracle of the East Sea, in charge of all the affairs of the Directorate of Celestials of the East Sea Province, and also had the power to supervise all the affairs of the East Sea Province. When Wu Qi was not in the East Sea Province, Princess Zhanglu was Wu Qi's representative, temporarily acting as the prefecture overseer of the East Sea Province. Lu Qingfeng was appointed as the chief supervisor of the East Sea Province, and was in charge of all the administrative affairs of the East Sea Province. Lu Qingfeng was responsible for all the daily development of the East Sea Province, such as agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, fishing, population growth, mining, weapon forging, and many other things. Yan Bugui was appointed as the chief judge of the punishment court of the East Sea Province, and was also in charge of punishments and spies. This was Yan Bugui's job, and he was naturally familiar with it. Originally, he was supposed to be working under Yan Dan in Anle County, but the East Sea Province was really short of manpower, so Lu Qingfeng transferred him here. From then on, he was considered to have left the system of Yan Dan's courtiers, and belonged to the ranks of Wu Qi's personal retainers. Lord Xiansheng was appointed as the military minister of the East Sea Province's military court, in charge of the water, land, human, and demon forces of the East Sea Province, and was responsible for the recruitment and training of soldiers. Lord Xiansheng had cultivated the body of a dragon, and came from a family with profound knowledge, so he was very familiar with military affairs, such as setting up formations and commanding troops. Among Wu Qi's subordinates, he could be considered as a first-class general. If it were someone else, Wu Qi would not be at ease. He would not let a guy like Ao Buzan command the army of the East Sea. God knows if the people he brought out were soldiers or bandits. Catfish Flood Dragon was appointed as the left military minister of East Sea Prefecture's military court, and also the chief supervisor of Navy Army, in charge of the Water Demon Army in East Sea Prefecture. He had no choice but to let an unreliable person like Catfish Flood Dragon lead the navy of the East Sea. Wu Qi did not have many reliable subordinates, and Catfish Flood Dragon could be considered as someone who had a close relationship with Wu Qi, so he could trust her. If Ao Buzan was a little more reliable, Wu Qi would not let Catfish Flood Dragon control the navy of East Sea Province. The only thing that worried Wu Qi was that Catfish Flood Dragon would lead the army of aquatic demons in the East Sea Province. He hoped that before the army could play its role, the soldiers in the army would not be eaten up by Catfish Flood Dragon. After all, Catfish Flood Dragon had a big appetite, and those aquatic demons who had cultivated themselves into spirits were fresh and delicious seafood. Huang Liang was appointed as the right military minister of East Sea Prefecture's military court, and also the chief supervisor of Army, in charge of the land army of East Sea Province. Compared to Catfish Flood Dragon, Wu Qi trusted Huang Liang more. This man was greedy, lustful, and afraid of death, but he was still a man of courage, and his loyalty to Wu Qi was praiseworthy. He did not have the overall strength to charge and break through enemy lines, but as a veteran of the military court, Huang Liang was absolutely qualified to be in charge of the daily training and organization of the army. At least, Huang Liang would not eat people, would he? Compared to Catfish Flood Dragon, who would choose a few from among her subordinates from time to time, he would not eat people, would he? Patriarch Jiang Yun and his two wives, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the three old immortals from Tranquil Vimla sect, together with Wu Qi's old brother, Supremacy Three Flame, and Lord Xianqing's father, Ao Guang, the Dragon King of East Sea, as well as an elder sent by Longbow Kingdom and Heavenly Ghost Clan respectively, formed the Elder Council of the Immortal Alliance of East Sea, responsible for the daily management of all the immortals born and bred in East Sea Province. All the cultivators born and bred in the East Sea Province, whether they lived in the sea or in the rivers, in the mountains or in the caves, whether they were humans, demons, ghosts, monsters, spirits, animals, plants, birds, or beasts, were put under the management of the Immortal Alliance of East Sea. At present, one of the most important parts of the Immortal Alliance of East Sea was Wu Qi's underhand sect. After years of development, it now had 18,000 new disciples, each of whom was a carefully selected cultivator with excellent aptitude. There were also the immortals from White Cloud Immortals sect and Tranquil Vimla sect. They did not have many of them, only several hundred of them. Then there were the aquatic demons ruled by the Dragon Palace in East Sea. Although their cultivation base was not strong, their numbers were huge. As for the people of Longbow Kingdom and the heavenly ghosts brought out by Wu Qi from the ghost realm, Wu Qi would not let them show their faces before their population grew to a certain level. With Wu Qi's protection and the protection of the East Sea Province, the Immortal Alliance of East Sea should be the only immortal organization left on Panga continent, where they could cultivate and develop in peace. Compared to the miserable scenes of immortals and itinerant cultivators in other provinces being hunted down by the Great Yu army, the cultivators of the Immortal Alliance of East Sea were living a blissful life. These people were the leaders of various fields under Wu Qi's command. Once he decided on their duties, they would naturally act according to their own authority, and Wu Qi could be a hands-off leader, creating better conditions and fighting for more benefits for the development of East Sea Province. After dividing the powers of East Sea Province, Wu Qi ate and drank to his heart's content with his subordinates, then wiped his mouth and turned to leave. After dividing the powers and distributing them to the people, Wu Qi could not be bothered with these complicated things. As the ruler of East Sea Province, what Wu Qi needed to do was to improve his cultivation base and enhance his power and status in Great Yu. When Wu Qi possessed the cultivation base of a primordial expert, and when Wu Qi had a seat in the imperial court of Great Yu, the East Sea Province would be unbreakable, and the East Sea Province would grow larger and larger. It could be said that the future of the entire East Sea Province rested on Wu Qi alone. When he flourished, the East Sea Province would prosper, and when he fell, the East Sea Province would perish. This was something that everyone understood. The detailed division of the powers of East Sea Province could be considered as an official meeting of Wu Qi's subordinates, and it would also make it easier for them to cooperate with each other in the future. At first, Wu Qi was worried that Huang Liang would have some strange ideas when he saw so many immortals and cultivators around him. If that was the case, he would be forced to get rid of Huang Liang. But, he did not expect that Huang Liang did not have the same idea as the rest of the people in Great Yu. After Lord Xianqing promised to find him a few beautiful clam demons as his concubines, Huang Liang happily got along with the others. He was a ruffian and scumbag with no moral bottom line. Wu Qi gave Huang Liang a precise definition. After that, he ordered Yen Bugue to send someone to keep a close watch on everything in the East Sea province, then dragged Princess Zhang Lu to the backyard of the prefecture overseer mansion. In the backyard of the East Sea Prefecture Overseer Mansion, 18 fiend figures with scarlet bodies and a towering stench of blood were standing quietly in a row, waiting for Wu Qi. These 18 fiend figures were Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppets. Before being thrown into the void by Lu Bang with the sky-veiling flag of chaos, Wu Qi had sent these puppets back to the East Sea to deliver a message to Princess Xianglu. When Wu Qi went missing, Princess Xianglu flew into a rage and immediately summoned all the puppets back. Then, she sacrificed a large number of immortals and cultivators to refine them into blood-draining celestial fiends with the vicious fiend technique recorded in the Blood Sea Grand Magic. This was the supreme divine ability recorded in the Blood Sea Grand Magic. Blood-draining celestial fiends were immortal and indestructible. Even if their true form was burned to ashes, as long as a wisp of their clones still existed, they could reform their true form with enough blood essence. The Blood Sea Grand technique might not be the most powerful technique of the Devil Path, but in terms of unpredictability and life-saving skills, if the Blood Sea Grand technique claimed to be the second best, then no other Devil Path cultivation technique would claim to be the first. Ignoring the voices of Lu Qingfeng and the others who were drinking and enjoying themselves in the front yard, Wu Qi looked at the 18 blood-draining celestial fiends delightedly, then quickly sent his divine will into their bodies. Originally, these celestial fiend puppets were made of metal, and relied on devouring all kinds of rare metals to improve their strength. At the same time, they could practice the celestial fiend battling heaven script to improve their cultivation base. Now, after being refined into blood-draining celestial fiends with the blood essence of countless immortals and itinerant cultivators by Princess Xianglu, their bodies had become a state between corporeal and incorporeal, and could change freely at any time. Their bodies were filled with thick blood essence, and the pure blood essence had perfectly fused with their metal bodies, turning them into a strange state between living and inanimate objects. Although the original celestial fiend puppets were very useful, they were, after all, dead puppets, and did not have much autonomy. Now that they had been refined into blood-draining celestial fiends, they were no different from living beings. As long as Wu Qi divided his nascent divinity and injected it into their bodies, they would be able to cultivate independently like living beings. On top of that, their thoughts would be smooth, their intelligence would be greatly improved, and their actions and reactions would be just like Wu Qi. These blood-draining celestial fiends relied on devouring blood essence to improve their cultivation base. As long as they were given enough blood essence, they could quickly improve to a level that was equal to Wu Qi, or even stronger than Wu Qi. On top of that, as long as a thread of their nascent divinity was not destroyed, even if Wu Qi's true body was destroyed and his original divine soul was destroyed, Wu Qi would not perish and could still rely on this thread of nascent divinity to reform his divine soul and fleshly body, allowing him to come back to life. Wu Qi smiled at Princess Xianglu. Princess Xianglu immediately sprinkled a 5-colored divine ray and sealed off the surrounding void. Wu Qi took a deep breath and quickly converted the chaotic energy in his body into blood sea fiend energy. He gave a light snort as a beam of blood-red light towered up into the sky from the top of his head, amidst which 18 empty blood lotus thrones emerged. The 18 blood-draining celestial fiends rushed into the blood-red light, sitting obediently on the lotus thrones. The blood essence in Wu Qi's body was rapidly sucked away by these blood-draining celestial fiends, while a part of his divine soul essence was also divided and injected into their bodies. With a light shout, Wu Qi slit his left wrist. Drops of blood flew out and formed a ghostly rune in the air. A muffled boom rang out, and a crack appeared in the void. Using a secret technique, Wu Qi had drawn the filthy blood water from the boundless blood sea under the yellow spring. A vast amount of blood water shot out and was devoured by the 18 blood-draining celestial fiends. The blood-red light around Wu Qi grew thicker and thicker, while the chilly wind and evil aura emanating from him grew stronger and stronger. The Blood Sea Grand Magic was a supreme divine technique from the Fiend League, and its cultivation speed was the fastest. By cultivating it at the same time, Wu Qi's cultivation base would certainly improve at an incredible rate. If someone else were to cultivate the blood sea grand magic, they might be contaminated by it and become brutal and bloodthirsty. But, Wu Qi happened to have obtained the cultivation scripture of Lord Buddha, the great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture. With this scripture, not only could Wu Qi cultivate the blood sea grand magic, he could also cultivate all kinds of divine light and Buddhist light of the Buddhist League, and even extract the blood essence and aura from the blood sea to refine his own natal relic. With this scripture, why would he be afraid of the backlash from the fiend technique? Under the heaven, apart from those who were cultivating the scroll of stealing, who else could cultivate so many supreme-grade techniques at the same time like Wu Qi, who could be so unscrupulous? The 18 blood-draining celestial fiends danced and sang on the blood-red lotus thrones, letting out shrill cries from time to time. All of a sudden, a strange cry rang out, and a large sheet of dense blood-red flame burst out of their bodies. Wu Qi's nascent divinity had been injected into their bodies, stimulating their natal true flame. He had truly become one with these blood-draining celestial fiends, and attained the true body of the Fiend League that could not be killed or destroyed. Chapter 788. After spending a few days to fuse the blood-draining celestial fiend with himself, Wu Qi had achieved a minor achievement in his blood sea grand magic. After spending a few more days with Princess Zhonglu and reminiscing about the feelings of parting, Wu Qi finally thought of some serious matters. He struggled to get up from the sweet dream, and while Princess Zhonglu had gone to the newly established Directorate of Celestials in East Sea Province, Wu Qi lazily brought Ao Buzan and the Dragon Python sisters to a beautiful valley outside East Sea City. Piles of dead beasts and birds were piled up on the ground, and 2 dragon pythons, each over 3,000 feet long and with bulging bellies, were lying lazily on top of them. They were snoring, with saliva dripping from the corners of their mouths. Occasionally, they would raise their heads and swallow a few dead beasts while sleepwalking. Their bodies were fat, and their bellies were dozens of times thicker than the rest of their bodies. They looked as ugly as an ordinary cauliflower snake that had just swallowed a can. The scenery in the valley was very good, but with so many corpses and the 2 dragon pythons spewing out poisonous gas, the flowers and trees in the valley had all withered. Especially the smell in the valley was extremely unpleasant, it was mixed with the stench of rotting corpses. As soon as Wu Qi walked into the valley, he could not help but cover his nose. Gold Horn and Silver Horn must have not brushed their teeth for a long time. When they were in the Immortals' cave abode on Myriad Immortals' planet, they had been eating grass all day long. Although they had not brushed their teeth for over 1,000 years, when they opened their mouths, the smell of grass was still there, and it was not as bad as now. Now, they had been eating fish and meat all day long, and they were used to swallowing everything in one gulp, not even bothering to wash their internal organs. So, it was easy to imagine how their mouths tasted. Holding his breath, Wu Qi strode up to the brothers, then gave Goldhorn a heavy kick on the head. "Get up, you 2 fat pigs. Are you still dragon pythons? Do you think you can still fly like this?" The bodies of Goldhorn and Silverhorn were extremely fat. Other demons of the snake and flood dragon species all had slender, agile and vigorous bodies, but these 2 brothers were so fat and bloated that they did not look like dragon pythons at all. Instead, they looked more like 2 fat silkworms. Their fleshy wings drooped weakly on their backs, and there was a thick layer of fat growing in the middle of their membranes. Wu Qi wondered if they could still fly in the sky. Goldhorn raised his head lazily, opened his eyes, and gave Wu Qi a glance. "Boss, you're back," he cried out happily. "You're back. Aya, you don't know, during the days when you were not here, that little sparrow was seduced by a firebird from Nanshan. Aya, old madam doesn't even care. That little sparrow's feathers haven't even fully grown yet, and he's already eloping." Wu Qi was dumbfounded. He really didn't see little K's shadow this time. Had she been lured away by a firebird? Oh, that firebird should be a fire phoenix, right? Otherwise, how could the proud little fall in love with him? In that case, the East Sea would have a branch of phoenix descendants in the future, wouldn't it? Wu Qi laughed immediately. That was a good thing, for the phoenix was a very powerful divine bird. With a few more phoenixes in the East Sea, the overall combat strength of the East Sea would be greatly enhanced in the future. After laughing for a while, Wu Qi pulled out the dragon python sisters, who had coiled up into a ball from under his sleeve. The sisters had shrunk to 3 inches in length and were coiled up in Wu Qi's palm. Their golden and silver bodies looked like they were carved from gems, glinting faintly under the sunlight. Suddenly, Goldhorn and Silverhorn's eyes froze. They stared fixedly at the dragon python sisters, while their lower bodies, which were drooping over the pile of corpses, slowly arched up in a very strange manner and gradually turned into the shape of an arch lying on Wu Qi's head. Ao Buzan pointed at Goldhorn and Silverhorn and burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that his body rocked back and forth, and his saliva sprayed all over Wu Qi's head. Ao Buzan was a lascivious man, but he had never had any wicked thoughts about the dragon python sisters. He knew very well that for a pure-blooded dragon, having sex with a creature like a dragon python was like a mouse having sex with a cat. His life would be in danger. For the sake of his own life, Ao Buzan had never been close to the dragon python sisters. So, when he saw Goldhorn and Silverhorn's reaction to the dragon python sisters, Ao Buzan had a feeling that he had defeated Goldhorn and Silverhorn in terms of moral cultivation, and left them far behind. Look, I've never fallen for these 2 girls, but why are you so unbearable? It turns out that I, Ao Buzan, am the real gentleman. Saliva dripped down from Goldhorn and Silverhorn's mouths. Goldhorn fixed his eyes on the elder sister, who had golden scales, while Silverhorn fixed his eyes on the younger sister, who had silver scales. While drooling, the brothers cried out, "Master, let go of these 2 girls. They were still virgins. How could they let you touch them as you please? Don't touch them. Don't touch them." While spraying saliva, Goldhorn and Silverhorn opened their mouths and bit Wu Qi's palm at the same time. They were really anxious now. How could Wu Qi touch the delicate scales of his sweethearts with his own hand? Wu Qi looked at their beautiful luster, their translucent scales, their slender waists, and their translucent wings, which were light and beautifully shaped, which were completely different from his own wings. How could Wu Qi dare to touch such stunning beauties? Only the 2 of them could touch them. Hastily, Wu Qi threw the dragon python sisters away and took a few steps back. Grinning coldly, he said, "I saved these 2 from the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance. They seem to be of the same race as you. But, why don't you look alike?" After being thrown away by Wu Qi, the dragon python sisters' bodies swayed in the wind and grew to more than 3,000 feet long, exactly the same size as Goldhorn and Silverhorn. However, their bodies were slender and beautiful, while Goldhorn and Silverhorn's bodies were at least 20 times thicker than theirs. If the dragon python sisters' bodies were tall and beautiful bamboos, then Goldhorn and Silverhorn were 2 hogwash buckets. When Goldhorn and Silverhorn saw that the peerless beauty in their eyes had become as tall as them, they hastily went up to her while drooling. "My lord is wise. My lord is wise. Everyone else is dead, but these 2 must be saved. May I ask your name, young lady? Are you interested in having babies with us?" 2 swift and fierce beams of light tore through the air, filling the air with a harsh whistling sound. The dragon python sisters twisted their bodies and lashed their tails heavily on the faces of Goldhorn and Silverhorn like whips, sending sparks flying in all directions. Their long and thick bodies were thrown tens of miles away and slammed heavily into a cliff, sending dust and rocks flying in all directions, while a nearby hill collapsed because of the heavy impact. Amidst the deafening noise, sand and dust rose in all directions. Goldhorn and Silverhorn, who were dizzy from the beating, could not even feel the pain. Strangely, they arched their lower bodies and swam back to the dragon python sisters. What a great strength!" Goldhorn cried out joyfully. "Young lady, your blow is accurate and ruthless. My heart is filled with sweetness." Silverhorn's mouth was bleeding. Staring straight at the sisters, he giggled foolishly and said, "Beating is a sign of affection, and scolding is a sign of love. Just beat me hard, you 2. Ouch, hit me, hit me, I beg of you, hit me quickly. Your tails are slender and translucent, and they are so beautiful. It's so refreshing to be beaten like this by two young ladies. It makes my cultivation base improve greatly. Ao Buzan shuddered on Wuqi's head and murmured in a low voice, these two fools are really despicable. Wuqi shook his head gently and said with a wry smile, they are not despicable, they are just infatuated. Sigh, the husband's discipline is weak. Look at them. When they get married in the future, won't they suffer from domestic violence all day long? With a gloomy face, Ao Buzan clenched his teeth and said, that's why Lao Tzu hates dragon python girls. If he has sex with them, he has to be careful that a certain part of Lao Tzu's body will be swallowed by them the next day. Why is Lao Tzu born into the dragons? If Lao Tzu were some other race, he would never let these two girls go. Resting his chin on his forepaws, Ao Buzan looked up at the sky and sighed. If only Lao Tzu could learn the ability to change his appearance. Well, if Lao Tzu could transform into the appearance of the great celestial emperor. Those beautiful female immortals in his harem are all the best ones carefully selected from all the realms in the universe. Drool dripped from the corner of Ao Buzan's mouth, wetting a large patch of Wuqi's hair, which was a perfect contrast to Goldhorn and Silverhorn, whose mouths were full of saliva. The dragon python sisters jumped up and down excitedly, waving their long tails and lashing Goldhorn and Silverhorn. When Wuqi rescued the sisters from the sovereign, they sensed a familiar scent from Wuqi that moved their hearts. Therefore, they had been following Wuqi in a daze. It was not until today, when Wuqi brought them to Goldhorn and Silverhorn, that they were surprised to find that there was a pair of dragon python brothers in the world. The soaring dragon pythons of fire and ice were ancient creatures that were said to have gone extinct. Yet, there were two pairs of them in this place. They did not need to mate with other kinds of flood dragons or snakes. If the female dragon pythons copulated with other kinds of flood dragons or pythons, they could not help but eat each other. Now, they did not need to copulate with other kinds of males. With the pure-blooded dragon python brothers around, they could reproduce more pure-blooded descendants and let them spread their branches. To be precise, from an aesthetic point of view, Goldhorn and Silverhorn met the standard of handsome men in the eyes of dragon pythons, while other flood dragons and pythons were more in the category of food in the eyes of dragon pythons. But the size of Goldhorn and Silverhorn. For example, no matter how handsome a man was, when he weighed 400 kilograms, he could not be regarded as a handsome man, could he? The dragon python sisters were both happy and disappointed. They had lived in the valley for a long time and did not know how to communicate with others. They were surprised to find that the impact of the opposite sex and the same race made their blood rush to their heads. So, they simply beat and cursed Goldhorn and Silverhorn to vent their complex emotions. Goldhorn and Silverhorn struggled and howled in the storm like whipping, but why did Wuqi and Ao Buzan feel that their moans were about to reach their climax? Do they have masochistic tendencies? Wuqi shuddered. He shook his head and cried out, all right, I'll make the decision for you today. You are husband and wife from now on. As for how you pair up, that's your own business. Work hard and give my East Sea province thousands of little dragon pythons. After shouting a few times, Wuqi brought Ao Buzan, who was also shivering, out of the valley in a flurry. Inside the valley, the dragon python sisters, whose eyes were red, whipped Goldhorn and Silverhorn even harder. Goldhorn and Silverhorn snorted, then joyfully struggled, wailed, moaned, and twisted as much as they could under the whipping of the two sisters. The atmosphere in the valley was getting stranger and stranger. Chapter 789. Yu Xiong Plain, Liangzhu. While Wuqi was dividing the authority of his subordinates in the East Sea City and matchmaking the dragon python, the atmosphere in King Baishan's mansion was extremely tense. A few experienced and steady servants were carefully cleaning the bloodstains in the courtyard with plant ashes, and carefully wiping the huge stone floor until it was as clean and shiny as a mirror. In the great hall, King Baishan sat behind a stone table with a gloomy face, his upper body bared. He was clad in a pair of hempen trousers, and nothing else on his person. Two naked girls were lying in front of the stone table. Their necks were twisted at a weird angle. One of the girls had a 3-inch deep cyan fist mark in the middle of her spine. It was obvious that they had died in an unusual way. A few beautiful young girls with slender bodies like spring willows stood in the corner of the hall, trembling. Their frightened eyes swept between the legs of the two young girls on the ground from time to time. There was blood and filth flowing down slowly. It was clear that they had been raped and then killed. Faint cries could be heard coming from the two naked corpses. It was the sound of their souls being imprisoned on the surface of the corpses by a spell. Anyone with a little bit of cultivation base could see two pale green human-shaped smoke twisting and struggling above the corpses, but no matter how hard they tried, they could not get more than 3 feet away from them. King Yangshan looked old, but his exposed body was stronger than that of an ordinary young man. Under his smooth and moist skin, his muscles were full of strength like steel ingots, and twisted blue veins were wriggling under his skin. Every time his heart beat, his blood vessels would twitch slightly, and the sound of blood flowing could be heard coming from them. A little man carved of black jade was placed on the stone table. King Baishan stared fixedly at the cracks that covered its surface like cobwebs as he murmured to himself, "Who killed my son?" Jijua's cultivation base is only at the 3 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, but in fact, his cultivation base has long broken through to the 9 stars realm of the second Panga heaven. Once I get the Wu Yen from His Majesty, I'll be able to help him forcibly break through the second Panga heaven and reach the Hongmeng Panga heaven, forming the minor Panga's sacred body. Clenching his fists so tightly that his knuckles creaked, King Baishan gritted his teeth and said, "Who else but a supreme oracle or a primordial expert can kill my son?" Suddenly, a beautiful woman in a long black dress and adorned with many jade ornaments rushed out of the back of the hall, crying. She threw herself at King Baishan and cried, "Your Highness, you must avenge Jin." Frowning, King Baishan slapped the woman's neck with a backhand and knocked her out. He shouted coldly, "Who told this to Wang Fei? Drag this blabbermouth out and behead him. Kill all his relatives for this king. Send Wang Fei back to the backyard and lock her up in the Xian Bing Yin prison, so that she can sober up. Her crying is so annoying." At King Baishan's order, a few plump shrews strode out of the hall, grabbed King Baishan's wife, and ran madly toward the Xian Bing Yin prison behind the mansion. A few of Wang Fei Shan's maidservants were dragged out by a group of ferocious guards. No matter which of them told Wang Fei Shan about King Zhangqiu's death, these beautiful maidservants were beheaded before they could cry and beg for mercy. At the same time, some guards had rushed to the maidservants' homes with soldiers and killed their entire families. Heads rolled and blood flowed all over the ground. The pungent smell of blood and the heads of a few beautiful women placed on the stone table in front of him made King Baishan feel a little better. He grabbed the head of a maidservant and slowly stroked her cheek as he murmured in a low voice, "I don't care who killed Ji Yao, I'll wipe out your entire clan. Hee, somebody, tell me, what has King Zhangqiu been busy with these days?" 2 immortals in white robes walked out slowly. They exchanged a glance, then cupped their fists and bowed to King Baishan at the same time. "Your Highness, the young master has not been in Liangzhu these days, and we really don't know what he has been doing." "Oh." King Baishan gave the 2 immortals a cold look and snorted coldly. Suddenly, the maidservant's head in his palm turned into a wisp of smoke and drifted away. He bowed his head and thought for a while, then gritted his teeth and said with a grim smile, "Go and find out what Ji Yao has been doing recently, and find out who he has a grudge against recently." Pointing a finger in a certain direction, King Baishan said with a cold snort, "Go and find out if anyone in that mansion is out these days, and find out if anyone with strong enough cultivation base to kill Ji Yao has suddenly disappeared in Liangzhu. In short, don't let go of any clues. I want you to thoroughly investigate anyone who might have killed Ji Yao." The 2 white-robed immortals bowed deeply in silence and accepted King Baishan's order, then hurried out of the great hall, lest King Baishan suddenly lose his temper and execute them like the maidservants. This was Liangzhu, the heart of Diyu. If King Baishan wanted to kill a few immortals he had been secretly raising, he did not need any excuse, nor did he need to waste any effort. As soon as the two immortals left, Lu Bang strode into the great hall with a straight face, clad in the robe of an immortal king. King Baishan gave Lu Bang a cold look, his face suddenly twisted to the extreme. He pressed both hands on the stone table, gnashed his teeth, and glared at Lu Bang as he roared, "Lu Bang, is this what you promised me? Ji Yao can become the human emperor. But he's dead, he's dead, he's dead." King Baishan clenched one of his teeth so hard that it was broken. Pointing a finger at Lu Bang, he growled, "Are the promises of the celestial court all bullshit?" Lu Bang swaggered over to a table next to King Baishan and sat down. With an appreciative smile on his face, he glanced at the two female corpses lying on the ground, then at the heads of several beautiful women on the table. He sighed softly and said, "These two on the ground are not bad. What a pity, judging from the corners of their eyes and brows, they were still virgins before they died. What a waste." King Baishan smashed the stone table in front of him with a palm and roared, "I'm telling you, Ji Yao is dead." Lu Bang gave King Baishan a sideways glance and said with a cold grin, "So what if he's dead? You don't lack a son like him. King Zhangqiu is dead, but don't you still have King Yangqiu and a few other sons? In particular, King Yangqiu's aptitude is better than King Zhangqiu's, and his cultivation base is even higher than King Zhangqiu's. It's just that the status of his birth mother is a little lower. But, as a man, you shouldn't judge him by his birth mother's status." King Baishan trembled with anger. What was Lu Bang talking about? What a mess. What a complete disregard for human morality. What a bastard to the extreme. Stroking his beard, Lu Bang said slowly, "Bring me good wine, good food, and beautiful women. Your Highness, I'm here to bring you good news." King Baishan grinned hideously, then suddenly clapped his hands and said through gritted teeth, "Good news? Bah!" As King Baishan clapped his hands, dozens of heavily armed generals quietly appeared out of thin air, brandishing their blades and swords as they surrounded Lu Bang. Their faces were expressionless, but their eyes gleamed with a blood-red gleam. Clearly, they were fierce generals who had killed countless people on the battlefield, and judging from their threatening auras, they all had the cultivation base of peak second Panga heaven. Lu Bang gave King Baishan a look, then sighed and shook his head. "If your Highness wants to give up a chance to have one of your sons become an expert of Hongmeng Panga heaven, then you can do it to me." King Baishan was taken aback. After hesitating for a long time, he finally waved his hand gently. He coughed once, and a few maids immediately brought in fine wine and delicacies. There were also beautiful dancers in revealing clothes singing and dancing in the main hall, performing all kinds of enchanting and charming dance moves. King Baishan glanced at the little figure carved out of black jade on the table that represented King Zhangqiu's safety, then waved his sleeve and turned it into dust that drifted away. In just a few breaths of time, King Baishan had begun to forget that he once had a proud son named King Zhangqiu. Looking at Lu Bang as if nothing had happened, he said in a flat voice, "You mean King Tangqiu, don't you? How can you guarantee that he won't be killed like his brother?" Lu Bang chuckled and said in a steady voice, "How about we make King Tangqiu an existence who can stand shoulder to shoulder with a primordial immortal first? There are going to be major natural disasters in several mortal worlds, and if King Tangqiu can rescue those mortals, the virtues bestowed upon him will be enough to advance his cultivation base. With the help of the spirit herbs and mystic arts of Buddhism from the celestial court, won't it be a piece of cake for King Tangqiu, who has already reached the peak of second Panga heaven?" King Baishan pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "That doesn't seem to be enough." Lu Bang nodded and said, "The previous agreement still stands. Ji Tao will be the candidate for the human emperor, and once the plan of the Celestial Court and Buddhism League succeeds, the current human emperor will certainly be ousted. At that time, ha." After a few laughs, Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Your Highness, you just have to remember that when the time is right, Your Highness will mobilize a part of Liangzhu's army to attack the 33 heavens and the sacred Vulture Mountain." King Baishan took a deep breath, reached out a hand, grabbed a dancer who had come to his side, and pressed her head hard against his crotch. Gritting his teeth and pondering for a while, King Baishan snorted coldly and said, "I don't want to see what happened to Ji Tao again. Ji Tao is my favorite son. Since you've made the promise, you have to make sure that nothing bad happens to him and that he will sit on the throne safely." Impatiently, Lu Bang grabbed 4 dancers and pressed them to the ground. While undressing himself, he said with a smile, "Don't worry, Your Highness, King Zhangqiu's death this time was a complete accident. Who would have thought that the Marquis of East Sea Province would show up with Kunwa swords? With the fiend-slaying sword formation here, how could King Zhangqiu not die?" King Baishan was so frightened that he jumped to his feet, and the dancer under his crotch cried out in pain as a row of teeth was pulled out of her mouth by him. Glaring at Lu Bang, he roared, "What did you say? Kunwa swords? You. Lu Bang gave King Baishan a sideways glance and said with a cold snort, "That's why Tan Lang can't live. He must die. You'll have to make the arrangements. I don't have the strength to kill him, so I can't do anything about it." Burrowing deep into the body of one of the dancers, Lu Bang bared his teeth and said, "Kill him and seize those Kunwa swords, and I guarantee King Yangqiu will have an 80% chance of ascending the throne." Your Highness, my palace is empty and lonely. Can you give me over 1,000 dancers to fill it up?" King Baishan narrowed his eyes and ignored Lu Bang. His eyes flickered with a fierce gleam, and for a moment, no one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 790. With fine wine, beautiful women, and dozens of boxes of precious toys, Lu Bang bade farewell to King Baishan and returned to the Changle Palace he had built in high spirits. He was in a good mood, but when he suddenly saw someone standing in front of the palace gate, Lu Bang's face turned extremely unsightly. It was as if he was a beautiful girl who had stepped into a pile of dog shit when she went out in expensive boots she had just bought. His good mood of the whole day suddenly collapsed, and Lu Bang almost jumped to his feet and cursed. When he saw a forest of fragrant trees 1,000 feet away from the gate of Changle Palace had been cut down, and a large group of craftsmen from the workshops of Great Yu's imperial palace were busy building houses, he even had the urge to pull out a knife and stab someone. While Lu Bang was having fun with King Baishan in King Baishan's mansion and making some secret deals, Wu Qi rode on Ao Buzan and entered the city of Liangzhu with Gold Horn, Silver Horn, and the sisters. With the jade medallion given to him by the Yellow Emperor, Wu Qi entered De Yu's imperial palace openly and met Emperor Haozuan at the first moment. It was still the same ancient Great Hall, and Emperor Haozuan was still dressed as before. He sat on the throne, and streams of purple light and starlight poured down from the top of the hall and poured into his body. Emperor Haozuan's aura rolled like a bottomless abyss, enveloping the whole Great Hall and even the entire imperial palace of De Yu. Unlike the time when Wu Qi was conferred the title of Marquis of East Sea Province, his aura was extremely restrained in front of all the courtiers, making him look harmless. But today, when Wu Qi entered the palace alone, the emperor had unleashed his aura. It was as unfathomable as a bottomless abyss, and as overbearing as the blazing sun. Emperor Haozuan sat on the throne, emanating an aura so strong that no one dared to look at him directly. He stood in front of Wu Qi like a real sun. Wu Qi bowed respectfully to the emperor and showed him the jade medallion given to him by the Yellow Emperor. Emperor Haozuan nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "The sacred emperor has sent a special emissary to tell me about it. I already know the purpose of your trip. Just do it wholeheartedly, and no one in Yuxiong Plain can stop you." After pondering for a moment, Emperor Haozuan said indifferently, "The King of Han, Lu Bang, is the reincarnation of the Celestial Emperor, the son of the Celestial Emperor of the Celestial Court. He is now the Celestial Emissary of De Yu, and is responsible for coordinating everything between the Celestial Court and De Yu. It is not good that you hurt him." Wu Qi bowed and accepted the order, then put forward a few requests to the emperor. The emperor agreed to Wu Qi's request without hesitation. Immediately, thousands of specially made jade medallions representing the eunuchs of Deyu's imperial court were given to Wu Qi, and the craftsmen of Deyu's imperial court were sent to build a East Sea mansion for Wu Qi in front of Liu Bang's Chang'e Palace outside Liangzhu. Emperor Haozuan even issued an inexplicable decree. It was said that Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, was proficient in the hybridization of rice, so he had specially ordered Tan Lang to station in Liangzhu and teach him the secret technique in the agricultural court to increase the food production of Deyu. It was a decree that puzzled all the civil and military officials of Deyu who heard the details. Hybrid rice? What the hell was that? The agricultural court of Deyu was only responsible for supervising the people of Deyu to sow and harvest on time, as well as managing the granaries of Deyu. Since when did the agricultural court start to play with the technique of technological improvement? The soil on Panggu continent was fertile, and the endless natural energy made it fertile for crops that could be harvested several times a year. As long as the people of Deyu were willing to put in the effort and throw all kinds of crop seeds into the fields, they would have a bumper harvest in a month or two. Overall, Deyu's food production was extremely excessive, so it was meaningless to play with hybridization of rice to increase food production. But since Emperor Haozuan had issued the decree, all the civil and military officials could only keep their questions to themselves. In any case, with this decree, he could live openly in Liangzhu and fool around. Although he was a foreign subject, and according to the rules of Deyu, he was not qualified to live in Yuxiong Plain for long. But, since Emperor Haozuan had specially ordered him to teach the agricultural court the technique of hybrid rice, he could stay in Liangzhu until those officials learned the technique. As for when those officials would learn the technique, Emperor Haozuan did not know, nor did all the civil and military officials in the court. Even Wu Qi himself did not know the exact answer to this question, because Wu Qi only knew the term hybrid rice, and he did not know what it was exactly. But, since it was just an excuse, Wu Qi had provided Emperor Haozuan with an excuse that would make everyone under the heaven vomit blood. After bidding farewell to Emperor Haozuan, Wu Qi left the imperial palace of Deyu with thousands of craftsmen and came excitedly to the beautiful white sand bay outside Liangzhu. Liu Bang did not like the residence of the previous celestial ambassador in Liangzhu, so when he was appointed as the celestial ambassador of the celestial court in Deyu, he immediately chose White Sand Bay, a place with beautiful scenery, to build himself a large Chang'e palace. In the palace, he kept a large number of beautiful female immortals and cultivators, and tens of thousands of maids at his beck and call. Every day, the air in Chang'e Palace was filled with the fragrance of wine and meat, singing and dancing, making it one of the most luxurious places in Yuxiong Plain. Because of the frequent appearance of scantily clad female immortals and cultivators near Chang'e Palace, Emperor Haozuan had even issued a secret decree forbidding the young members of all the noble clans in Liangzhu to come within 100 miles of Chang'e Palace. Compared with the conservative, closed, old-fashioned, and oppressive Liangzhu, Chang'e Palace was like a group of eminent monks of the Buddhist League who had been in seclusion for 100 years, with a gorgeously dressed naked woman suddenly inserted into their midst. It was so abrupt and out of place. White Sand Bay was a bay washed out by a tributary of a great river outside Liangzhu. Within hundreds of miles, the bay was filled with white, thumb-sized pieces of supreme-grade jade, which shone brightly under the sun. It was a rare sight outside Liangzhu. Near White Sand Bay, there was a forest of fragrant trees, so thick that it would take a dozen people to wrap their arms around it. This kind of forest was also a rare magical tree, and it was born with a faint fragrance of ambergris, which was the best at repelling mosquitoes and all kinds of poisons. It had taken Liu Bang a lot of thought to choose White Sand Bay to build Chang'e Palace. Sitting on the tall building of Chang'e Palace every day, one would feel the refreshing breeze, and see the sky and the water blending into one. The white jade beach and the emerald green fragrant trees complemented each other, and the faint fragrance of the fragrant trees lingered around one's body. There were also countless beautiful women to entertain one's ears and eyes. It was truly a first-class enjoyment in the world. All the palaces and pavilions in Chang'e Palace were built with the fragrant trees of the fragrant trees. If one stayed in these pavilions for a long time, one would be surrounded by an elegant and lasting fragrance, which could refresh one's mind and heart. It was hard to describe the wonderful effect of this fragrance. Bringing thousands of craftsmen with him, Wu Qi went straight to Chang'e Palace. Regardless of the consequences, he directly ordered them to cut down the thousands of acres of fragrant trees in front of the main entrance of Chang'e Palace, clearing out a large open space. After that, the craftsmen dug a deep trench around the open space using the huge fragrant trees they cut down, and planted 3 layers of tall fences. These craftsmen worked in the workshops directly under Diyu Palace, and each of them had an impressive cultivation base. Not only were they adept at building all kinds of buildings, they also possessed an overall strength no weaker than a first-tier heaven immortal. It was worth noting that all the palaces built by Diyu Palace were built with huge stones. Without strength, how could these craftsmen move those huge stones that easily weighed millions of kilograms? With such an overall strength, the speed at which these craftsmen built the Marquis Mansion of East Sea Province was incredible. It only took these generals the time it took to finish a pot of tea to build the trench, which was 100 feet wide and 1,000 feet deep, and 10 miles long and wide. Even so, it only took them a quarter of an hour to finish the 3 layers of fences inside and outside the mansion. After that, they temporarily left the various buildings in the mansion, and instead, built 5 3-miles-tall watchtowers in the center and 4 corners of the mansion. It had a base of 36 feet in both width and length, and a height of 3 miles. From such a tall sentry tower, Lu Bang could clearly see every movement of every single person in Chang'e Palace. Even if Lu Bang moved from one female immortal's room to another female cultivator's room in the middle of the night, as long as he sent a few oracles who practice various divine abilities to stand on this sentry tower, he would be able to see everything clearly. In fact, with the overall strength of the people around Lu Bang, they could easily cover the entire Chang'e Palace with all kinds of restrictive spells. But, no one could withstand the anger in their hearts. Who would be in a good mood when 5 watchtowers, each 3 miles tall, were erected less than 1,000 feet away from their front door? The sentry tower Wu Qi asked these craftsmen to build was ridiculously tall, a 3 miles tall sentry tower. Since Pangu created the world, no matter if it was humans, immortals, demons, fiends, ghosts, or monsters, they had fought in so many wars, and had gone through countless apocalypses, yet such a monstrous thing had never appeared. The 5 watchtowers stood right in front of Chang'e Palace, each 3 miles tall. Even the craftsmen who built these watchtowers were grinning from ear to ear. Was the Marquis of East Sea trying to make things difficult for Lu Bang on purpose? When Lu Bang returned to Chang'e Palace with beautiful girls, fine wines, gold, silver, and jewelry, he saw Wu Qi standing in front of the gate and grinning at him. Ao Buzan, who was half a foot long, was lying on Wu Qi's head, wagging his tail like a shameless snake. On his left shoulder were gold horn and gold feather, and on his right shoulder were silver horn and silver feather. Both pairs of dragon pythons had their tails coiled tightly together, baring their teeth and sticking out their tongues at Lu Bang. Lu Bang rubbed his eyes and stared at Wu Qi for a long while, then turned to look at the 5 watchtowers in front of his door. His fair face suddenly turned dark. He dropped a fist-sized red pearl that he was fiddling with, jumped up 30 feet into the air, pointed a finger at Wu Qi, and growled, "Marquis of East Sea Province, what the hell are you doing in front of Lao Tzu's gate? Is there really such a tall watchtower?" With a smile on his face, Wu Qi pulled out Emperor Haozuan's special decree from under his sleeve and threw it to Lu Bang. Then, he bowed to Lu Bang and said, "King of Han, I'll be your neighbor from now on. Please take care of me." Well, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. It's fate that we live so close to each other. We must visit each other more often in the future. Lu Bang grabbed Emperor Haozuan's special decree and read it for a long time, then turned to look at Zhang Liang, Han Xian, Xiao He, and Fan Kuai behind him in confusion and asked, "Hybrid rice? What the hell is that? Ugh, is Diyu short of food lately? Doesn't Diyu have countless grains that rot and turn into firewood every year? Why does it need to increase its food production?" Zhang Liang, Han Xian, Xiao He, and Fan Kuai stared blankly at Lu Bang, then turned to look at Wu Qi together. Wu Qi's smile was so bright and enthusiastic that it made Zhang Liang and the others feel a chill run down their spines. Chapter 791. A gentle breeze blew into the luxurious pavilion along with the water vapor from the distant river. The cool breeze woke up Lu Bang, who was leaning against a pile of beautiful embroidery. Habitually, Lu Bang slapped the plump buttocks of the female immortal next to him, turned over, and was about to have a good taste of the delicate body of the female immortal. Suddenly, he thought of something, and got up from the bed. Gnashing his teeth, he pushed open the half-closed window. Under the green moonlight, 5 pitch-black watchtowers appeared in front of Lu Bang's eyes. How am I supposed to live like this? Lu Bang stared blankly at the towering watchtowers, and suddenly had an impulse to order Han Xian and his men to rush into the prefecture of East Sea and kill every single member of Wu Qi's clan. The Cloud Dragon Pavilion, where Lu Bang lived, was the tallest building in Changle Palace, but it was only 1,000 feet tall. Where was the watchtower built by Wu Qi? A 3-mile-tall watchtower was 4,500 feet tall, 4.5 times taller than Lu Bang's Cloud Dragon Pavilion. Lu Bang had to raise his head with great effort to see the highest point of the watchtower. At the highest point of the watchtower was a stone pillar about 100 feet tall, with a sunken brazier placed right in the middle of it, from which a green flame rose into the sky. Because of the height, the green flame illuminated the area within a radius of 100 miles. Under the illumination of the green flame, the Changle Palace, which was once a splendid and magnificent residence of an immortal, looked as creepy and horrible as the underworld. The guards patrolling the streets of Changle Palace were like the shadows of ghosts. A few soldiers from the prefecture of East Sea were poking half of their bodies out from the top of the watchtower, looking into Changle Palace without any scruples. They were looking down at Changle Palace from above, and could easily see everything that was happening in the palace, including the routes of those patrolling guards, as well as every move made by Lu Bang, who had opened the window and was looking at them. I can't live like this anymore. Lu Bang was so angry that his nose became crooked. The 3-mile-tall watchtower was right in front of Changle Palace. This was a blatant provocation, a blatant insult to their doorstep. Who was Lu Bang? Even in the celestial court, he was an important figure with great power. Who dared to do such a thing in front of his doorstep? These 5 watchtowers were so annoying. They were trying to teach Lu Bang a lesson. Because of these 5 watchtowers, Lu Bang did not even bother to have fun with the female immortal beside him last night. He angrily adjusted his breathing and fell asleep. Even so, Lu Bang, who usually had a good night's sleep as long as his aura was stable and he never dreamed, was having a nightmare because of the vibration of his immortal soul. In his dream, 5 black watchtowers were falling down on his head. In addition to the 5 ridiculously tall watchtowers, the other buildings in the East Seas Prefecture were also extremely bizarre. They were not a mansion, but a large military camp. In the center of the mansion was an arched hall shaped like a Mongolian yurt, surrounded by 2,000 wooden huts that looked like matchboxes. In each hut, 10 soldiers were stationed by Chi-Chi, all burly men. There was not even a maid in the whole mansion. In the center of the mansion was an arched hall that looked like a Mongolian yurt, surrounded by 2,000 wooden huts that looked like matchboxes. In each hut, 10 soldiers were stationed by Chi-Chi, all burly men. There was not even a maid in the whole mansion. This was a military camp that blocked the entrance to Changle Palace. And it was built by the craftsmen from the workshops of Deyu's imperial palace. If it had not been built by these craftsmen, which more or less represented Emperor Haozuan's will, Lu Bang would have sent his men to cause trouble for Wu Qi. For example, the 5 ridiculously tall watchtowers should have collapsed by now because of some accident. What is Tan Lang doing? Does he want revenge on me? Him. Lu Bang shook his head. He did not think that Wu Qi was qualified to cause him trouble. So, does this represent Emperor Haozuan's will? Or even that old fellow on Xianyuan Peak? TSK, what did they find? Lu Bang frowned thoughtfully. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked down at the lush green prefecture of East Sea and fell into deep thought. As the moon moved westward, a red glow spread out in the east, and before long, half of the sky was covered with the red glow of dawn. The red glow dispelled the gloomy and evil aura brought by the green flames in the 5 watchtowers, and it made Lu Bang feel much better. He looked mockingly at the East Sea, sneered, and shook his head. It's too late. Even if you have found some clues, so what? It's too late, really too late. Ants like you will eventually surrender to me. You does not need to exist any longer. Lu Bang smiled proudly. Suddenly, he felt a burning sensation in his lower abdomen. He walked excitedly back to his bed, grabbed a female immortal, and was about to enjoy her. Suddenly, a loud rumble rang out like a clap of thunder. The door of Changle Palace, tens of feet tall and 2 feet thick, made of pure gold, was knocked on. Amidst the loud and sonorous knocking, Wu Qi's thunderous voice rang through the whole palace, "Wake up, King of Han, Lu Bang. The little marquis has come to visit." Lu Bang, who was in high spirits just a moment ago, suddenly felt weak. Blankly, he held the female immortal in his arms and almost cursed out loud. Come to visit? Who comes to visit so early in the morning? The moon was still hanging over the mountains in the west, and the sun had not yet risen in the east. Lu Bang was still naked, and he had not even brushed his teeth. Who comes to visit at this time? Outside Changle Palace, Wu Qi, who was clad in a long burlap robe and a pair of straw slippers, his hair disheveled and his clothes disheveled, had a toothpick dangling between his lips and a lazy smile on his face, which was no different from a scoundrel on the streets. Laughing merrily, he kept punching the front door of Changle Palace. His fists were hard and powerful. Sparks flew in all directions from the door forged of pure gold, and every punch left a deep mark on the door. The few celestial soldiers and generals standing guard at the entrance of Changle Palace wanted to cry but had no tears to shed as they watched Wu Qi destroy the door to his heart's content. The door was entirely made of gold, inlaid with countless pearls and jades, and carved with countless patterns of rare flowers and plants. It was more like a rare work of art than a door. Again and again, Wu Qi punched the palace gate, turning it into a pockmarked mess. They had to bear the full responsibility for this. But, the celestial soldiers and generals guarding the door could not move at all. Laughing merrily, Huang Liang came before them with a group of ferocious soldiers. With a dozen men serving each of them, they locked all the joints of the celestial soldiers and generals, suppressing them completely. Because Princess Xianglu had held a few blood sacrifices in a row, the cultivation base of a group of soldiers from East Sea Province had skyrocketed. Now, they were all lower-tier heaven immortals, or 30th-tier heaven immortals. On top of that, the cultivation techniques of the human race were specifically used to strengthen their fleshly bodies, so every human soldier who had attained a certain level of cultivation base had a mighty strength that could move mountains and drain seas. Although these celestial soldiers and generals also had the cultivation base of heaven immortals, they paid more attention to the transformation of their divine abilities. As a result, the combined strength of their fleshly bodies was not enough to tear apart an army of soldiers from East Sea Province. But now, they were being suppressed by a dozen soldiers from East Sea Province. Even if they did have some divine abilities, how could they use them? Wu Qi's behavior could only be described as extremely vile when he came to visit someone early in the morning with a group of soldiers and smashed the door. But, in Wu Qi's opinion, he was already very gentle. If it were not for the fact that he had not figured out Lu Bang's trump card and Lu Bang's real strength, he would have thought of assassinating Lu Bang from behind. Wu Qi was also very interested in the sky-veiling flag of origin in Lu Bang's hand. Now that he had the thought of killing Wu Qi and seizing the treasure, it was not a big deal for him to bring a group of people to make a scene early in the morning. Wu Qi was shouting and yelling for Lu Bang to come out and receive the guests. His voice was full of energy, and his roars sounded like the rumbling of a cannon, shaking the ground of Changle Palace. Not long after, the dilapidated palace gates parted to the left and right, and a livid Han Xian rushed out with a large group of celestial soldiers and generals. Glaring at Wu Qi, Han Xian snapped, "How dare you? This is the temporary imperial residence of the King of Han. Who dares to make a scene here?" Glancing at Wu Qi with his sharp eyes, Han Xian turned angrily to the dozens of celestial soldiers and generals pressed against the palace wall by Huang Liang and his men. Gritting his teeth, he growled through gritted teeth, "Marquis of Donghai Province, do you think you've come to my door to fight?" Wu Qi gave Han Xian a surprised look. He waved his hand, and a few soldiers came up with a large pile of game. "Why do you say that, Your Excellency?" asked Wu Qi in surprise. "I've hunted a lot of good stuff in the middle of the night, and considering that the King of Han is my neighbor, I've come here to deliver the game." "Why do you say that I'm here to fight?" "Well, may I ask your name?" "Going out to hunt in the middle of the night, and delivering the game early in the morning?" Killing intent surged in Han Xian's eyes as he fought back the urge to stab Wu Qi in the face. Staring fixedly at Wu Qi, he snorted coldly and said, "I am Han Xian." "Oh," Wu Qi answered indifferently. Then, he put one hand on Han Xian's chest and pushed him back. "Han Xian? I've never heard of you. You're just a nobody. Well, I'm here to see your master. Can you please not stand in my way?" The power contained in his palm exploded like a bolt of lightning. Han Xian's bones let out a series of creaking noise, as the tremendous power nearly shattered all his bones. Wu Qi's cultivation base had now reached the level of a second-tier gold immortal. As he continued to fuse with the skeleton of the ancient immortal and absorb half of Buddha Fuda's Buddhist power, his overall strength was advancing by leaps and bounds every day. Obviously, Han Xian's cultivation base was not as strong as Wu Qi's, and Han Xian did not pay much attention to the cultivation of his fleshly body. Although Wu Qi's palm seemed to have pressed down lightly, it was actually filled with a surging force that could shatter an ordinary planet. Fortunately, when Han Xian saw that the situation was not good, he immediately stepped back. A red light filled with killing intent flashed rapidly across the surface of his body. Loud popping noises kept ringing out as he gradually wore down the tremendous force that Wu Qi had thrust into his body, turning it into layer after layer of fierce sword energy that shot out from all over his body. As the sword energy whistled through the air, the group of celestial soldiers and heavenly generals behind Han Xian was thrown into disarray by the sudden attack. Dozens of soldiers who bore the brunt of the attack had their armors shattered, causing them to fly backward while coughing up blood. A few unlucky ones had their bodies ripped apart by the sword energy, sending broken limbs flying in all directions. For a moment, it was a mess in front of Changle Palace. Wu Qi cried out in a fuss, "Han Xian, how could you do this to your own men? Is it fun to kill people so early in the morning?" Han Xian, who was nearly killed by Wu Qi's palm, was so angry that he coughed up blood. He glared at Wu Qi, but he had no time to refute Wu Qi's words. All he could think of was to force out the tremendous force that Wu Qi had thrust into his body. Just then, Lu Bang's voice came from afar, "Please forgive me for not going out to greet you, honorable guests." "He, Marquis of East Sea Province, you seem to be in a good mood. Please come in, come in, come in, come in." Wu Qi laughed and swaggered into Changle Palace with Huang Liang and the others. Chapter 792. In Changle Palace, next to the Cloud Dragon Pavilion, there was a high platform made entirely of green jade. The green jade was carefully selected, and had the same color and luster as the sky. The tall platform was carved with countless patterns of wind and clouds, and hundreds of huge dragons were flying in and out of the clouds, making the jade platform look as if it were about to fly straight into the sky. Qingming Platform was the place where Lu Bang usually feasted and had fun. The morning sun shone brightly on the Qingming Platform. A bonfire was burning in the middle of the platform, and a tiger, which had been cleaned and skinned, was placed on a wooden frame. Yellow fat was constantly seeping out of the tiger's body, dripping into the bonfire and making popping noises. Next to the bonfire, a chef was carefully preparing a fat tiger penis. A strange aroma slowly drifted out from the small pot in front of him, making people salivate and want to eat it. Sitting behind a jade table, Wuqi squinted at the chef for a while, then nodded to Lu Bang with a smile and said, "King of Han, you are enjoying yourself." Lu Bang sat opposite Wuqi with a smile on his face. He was surrounded by dozens of beautiful fairies, and he was holding a petite fairy with both hands, rubbing and groping her in his arms. Upon hearing Wuqi's words, Lu Bang smiled proudly and said, "I have no great ambition in my life. I just like good wine and beautiful women, and I just want to live a free and unfettered life." A female immortal picked up a red fruit and fed it into Lu Bang's mouth. Lu Bang chewed a few times, then smacked his lips, shook his head, smiled at Wuqi, and said, "That's why I begged the great celestial emperor to send me to Diyu. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll stay in Diyu and never leave Liangzhu. Hee, all the beautiful women in Liangzhu are waiting for me to dote on them." Wuqi narrowed his eyes and smiled. Did Lu Bang just say that he is a man with no great ambition? His words were as fake as they could be. If it were other ministers of Diyu, they might have been fooled by Lu Bang, but Wuqi knew what kind of person he was. Not to mention Lu Bang, how could Zhang Liang, Han Xian, and Xiao He, who were sitting next to him, willingly submit to a man with no great ambition? Especially that eagle-eyed Han Xian, who was definitely not a peaceful man. As for Fan Kuai, who stood behind Lu Bang, he was staring at Wuqi with his teeth clenched, as if he could not wait to rush up and tear Wuqi to pieces. It was too hypocritical to say that he had no great ambition in his life when he had so many brave men serving him. Although Lu Bang wanted to play tricks, Wuqi did not want to waste time with him. He knew very well that he was no match for Lu Bang if he played tricks. So, when fighting with such an old fox, it was better to go straight to the point and use the most direct and violent means, which was definitely more effective than beating around the bush and playing tricks. Picking up the large bronze wine vessel and taking a sip, Wuqi stared at Lu Bang and said with a sneer, "The sacred emperor has given me 108 kunwa swords and asked me to come to Liangzhu and keep an eye on King of Han's every move. May I ask King of Han, the Celestial Court, the Buddhist League, the 13 great heavenly ghost kings of the ghost realm, or any other people, what are your conspiracies? Please tell me frankly, King of Han, so that I can complete the task assigned by the sacred emperor." Lu Bang was stunned, and so were Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Xian, and the others. All of them stared at Wuqi as if they were looking at a ghost. After staring at Wuqi for a long time, Lu Bang suddenly laughed and said, "Lu Bang, don't understand what you're saying, Marquis of East Sea Province." Wuqi slapped the vessel with his palm, shattering it into countless specks of dust that drifted in the air. He straightened his back, put his hands on the jade table, and stared at Lu Bang as he said, word by word, "What are you trying to do? Destroy Diyu? Assassinate the sacred emperor Xianyuan? Seize the right to rule Panga continent? Please tell me frankly, King of Han. Otherwise, don't blame Wuqi for pestering you and making it impossible for you to get out of Changle Palace." Grinning coldly, Wuqi pointed at his nose with his thumb and said, "Remember, my real name is Wuqi. The name Tan Lang is the name of your master, Wuqi." Lu Bang coughed dryly and interrupted Wuqi. "It doesn't matter what your name is, Marquis of East Sea Province. You can call me kitty or puppy, or even dog dung or cow dung. I don't understand what you're saying, Marquis of East Sea Province. Somebody, see our guest out." Han Xian rose to his feet slowly. His whole body was surging with killing intent, and there were 3 stars shooting out of his eyes. He made no secret of his malice against Wuqi, and his surging killing intent turned into invisible blades that locked onto Wuqi's body from all directions. As soon as Lu Bang gave the order, Han Xian would not mind attacking and killing Wuqi with his strongest means. With a cold snort, 108 green swords suddenly appeared around Wuqi. Emanating a fierce aura, the Kunwu swords spun slowly according to some indescribable law of heaven and earth. He sneered in a low voice and said, "Oh, see our guest out. It's a pity that I, an unwelcome guest, don't want to leave. Give me an answer, or I'll seal off Changle Palace with fiend-slaying sword formation, preventing you from entering or leaving. Lu Bang's face turned livid with anger. He slapped the jade table and rose to his feet, pointing a finger at Wu Qi and snapped, "Do you think the fiend-slaying sword formation can decide everything?" He frowned and pondered for a while, then shook his head. Wu Qi had never calculated how many resources an immortal consumes in his cultivation, but he reckoned it would not be a small number. Lu Bang smiled, counted with his fingers, and told the story. For a mortal to cultivate to the Xiantian realm, he would probably need the resources produced in a mountain hundreds of miles in circumference. Herbs, natural energy, and all kinds of other things. A mountain hundreds of miles in circumference that was not considered barren was enough for a mortal to cultivate to the Xiantian realm. If a Xiantian warrior wanted to condense the Jin Dan, unless he was a brilliant genius, he would need the resources of a land thousands of miles in circumference. As long as there was a small energy vein within 1,000 miles to supply him with natural energy and some energy stones to mine, it would be easy for him to condense the Jin Dan. If a Jin Dan cultivator wanted to form his nascent soul, he would need the resources of a land 10,000 miles in circumference. All kinds of herbs, flying swords, and magical treasures, the herbs and minerals produced in a land 10,000 miles in circumference might not be enough. If there were not enough mineral veins in the area, the cultivator would have to find ways to find the resources he needed elsewhere. When a cultivator stepped into the nascent divinity realm, he would need even more resources to improve his cultivation base. He would have to take a certain amount of spirit pills every month, and he would have to consume energy stones every day. On top of that, he would need defensive magical treasures, flying swords to kill enemies, talismans, seals, and all kinds of strange things for his cultivation. Without a few energy veins within 100,000 miles of circumference, a nascent divinity cultivator could exhaust all the natural energy in the air with just one breath. As for heaven immortals, the resources consumed would have to be calculated in terms of planets. For example, the heaven immortals at the bottom of the 36th tier had to use spirit herbs that were thousands of years old to concoct the heaven immortal pills they needed. And, a planet with ordinary natural energy might not produce many spirit herbs that were thousands of years old. On the other hand, heaven immortals consumed a lot of natural energy. One breath of theirs might consume the total amount of natural energy that an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator would consume in a few days. Therefore, a planet with ordinary natural energy and resources could at most provide 3 to 5 low-tier heaven immortals and their disciples for their cultivation. This was the reason why there was usually only one nascent soul cultivator in an outer heavenly realm on a planet with ordinary natural energy. 3 to 5 low-tier heaven immortals, 20 to 30 nascent divinity cultivators, nearly 100 nascent soul cultivators, and hundreds of Jin Dan disciples. This was the maximum number of immortals and cultivators a planet could support. If there were more, the planet would be drained of all its energy veins, turning it into a dead planet in the future. Wu Qi nodded silently. What Lu Bang said was true. For example, when he was in the minor heavenly circle realm, whether it was the White Cloud Immortal sect or the Tranquil Vimla sect, both had 3 ancestral masters of heaven immortal realm leading their disciples to occupy a planet for their own cultivation, while some itinerant immortals occupied a planet with thin natural energy to cultivate alone. It was not that those itinerant immortals did not want to recruit disciples and establish their own sects, but that their territories could not support too many cultivators. Seeing Wu Qi nod, Lu Bang counted on his fingers and said the following: "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."